Okay, I can make myself comfortable up here. I realize I've been working this side of the stage a lot for some reason. Well, I'm gonna get over here for a bit. Hi, how's it going? Hello, everybody. Hope you all are enjoying yourself. It's nice to have people in the front too. You know, it makes us feel welcome. Makes us, we're excited to have you all here. This is funny. I very much come from, I guess, psychedelics and that emerging space. It's kind of funny, like so many people are moving from cannabis into psychedelics, and now I'm like up here on a cannabis stage. I'm going the other way, right? But I'm about, as previously stated, anything that grows from the earth, pretty good with me, all right? So let's go ahead and get them up on stage right now. So this is about the latest in cannabis food and beverages. Thank you all for being here. Shout out Cannadelic. Let's go. Here you go. Oh, yeah, actually, you have a mic. Cheers. What up, homie? Hi. Hello. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy yourselves.
Where should we sit?
Kind of take center.
Okay. You want to scoot over one
Sure.
more? Perfect.
Hello, everyone. First, thanks to Cannadelic. They did a really great show. I was talking to Pete and Colleen outside earlier, and I think many of us have been to 1,000 of these different conferences through the years. The content has been absolutely incredible. Paul Stamets yesterday for 2 hours, just dropping knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb. It was spectacular. So thanks to everyone here at Team Cannadelic for an incredible job. And really excited to present and moderate this next panel. Cannabis and culinary go together like chocolate and marshmallows, right? So when you really look at cannabis, it just, dinner and food is about getting together and building community and sitting down and sharing story time. And as that great tradition of having a beautiful glass of wine over dinner and talking about all of the fruitful flavors of that wine as you enjoy it paired with beautiful meals, we've seen the explosion of cannabis and the culinary combination. So have a couple of legends up here on stage with me today. So really excited. Philip here, he started the first legal cannabis dining experience at home in Colorado, Cultivating Spirits. It's really a pristine organization, and they've done incredibly high-end events. I can't wait to unpack those with you a little bit. And we have Chef Gigi over here that is an absolute legend. She came from the Caribbean and is really just bringing flair throughout, not just plant-based medicines, but adding a real sense of Latin flavor to it. So as you look and research both of these fine young individuals, you'll see how explosive their career growth is and where it's headed. You want to give a quick overview a little bit of what got you to open Cultivated Spirits and some of your biggest challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I just want to thank everyone for being in here today with your curiosity around the cannabis, food, and beverage space, and just around Cannadelic all around. Really grateful for Pete and Nurse Colleen putting this together and giving us the platform today to share our voice. So just want to start off with that gratitude. And yeah, I got into the cannabis space in 2009 in Colorado. That's when the medical boom hit, if you will, which they changed regulations to allow for medical dispensaries to thrive, as well as people to get their medical cards. And that's when really the industry is considered to have started in Colorado, and opened up dispensaries and worked on cultivations for a number of years. And so I was a really good cultivator. And going into legalization, and we voted on it in 2012 in Colorado, and in 2013, I started working with the Wall Street banker who moved out to Colorado for quote unquote the green rush, gearing up for January 1st of 14, whenever recreational dispensaries opened for the first time in the United States. And at that point, my whole mind opened up to what was coming through at that time, what was going to come into this movement. And it was all of these ancillary companies that at the time as a cultivator, I just had no idea was going to be there. And one of the things we started off with was a tourism company. And ultimately, I ended up creating Cultivating Spirits from that. In February 1st of 2014, we just celebrated our 9-year anniversary, and the whole goal was how do we get mainstream America to embrace cannabis? And at the time for me, it was to create wine-style cannabis experiences, something that would be appealing to consumers and non-consumers, really wanting to set something up that people desired to be at, whether they enjoyed cannabis or not. And really from there, it just totally became an advocate of tapping into the mainstream through food, but being able to open them up to a different way to see cannabis and experience it. So it's been quite the journey that we'll get into a little bit more since, but that's really how it started.
Do you want to walk us through a little bit about your journey?
Yes, of course. So I started back in, I've been a cultivator for many years. And then around 2016, I won the High Times Cannabis Cup for Best Cannabis Chef. And then we began to curate all kinds of wonderful experiences that included education, pairing, talking about terpene profiles and whatnot. But as things progressed, we started to realize that people even wanted more of the experience. So we began to curate our retreats, where it's more like a destination dinner with other activities that provide education, and it's like a fully immersive experience. So that way people can really understand and take their time and enjoy themselves, as well as, experience something new.
Immersive experience is really what cannabis cuisine is, because as you dive into that plant, your everything is combined. Your experience for the evening, your amazing food you're going to have, and really the company that you're keeping there is all going to be in the same headspace. And that's why I think that cannabis cuisine is such a unique approach. Is because it really just fosters community and builds people around a table. I know we had a great event that we did together a few years ago in Aspen. We partnered up with Native Roots, and we did the treehouse at the Aspen X Games. And it was for the VIP and athletes to come to afterwards and enjoy some amazing cuisine. And you were one of the chefs that led that initiative. You want to just walk through what that's like and what the future of this will be in a sporting events and just amazing destination cities.
Yeah, sure. So, kind of the difference between Gigi and I is that I am a kashom, which is a server and steward of cannabis. And this is education that we're going to be launching out to the public later on in this year. And what I do is around cannabis pairings, where we pair terpene profiles of cannabis with flavor profiles of food to harmonize and enhance the flavor, all done through smoking. And so this enables us to teach people how to identify their high before they even consume by connecting to the organoleptic properties of cannabis. And so we use the platform of fine dining to really educate people around more of a mindful consumption. And so they can really enhance experiences opposed to take away from them by really just using their senses, not necessarily needing the bud tender to educate them, not needing to be reliant upon a label. And through that, Bloomberg did an article on me in 2015. It was like the rise of the pot sommelier. So that the cannabis sommelier moniker, our label, started rising up at that time, and I went by that label for a long time. And so, my job is to really host, is to really educate, is to really hold that container of people throughout the experience, while the chef, just really focuses on the breakdown of terpenes that I present to them. And then they will create a menu that really complements that. Again, we're going for a harmonization. And for me, smoking's really nice to happen at these dinners because people feel the effects immediately. And so for me, the dining experience and being able to feel the effects immediately promotes for an atmosphere that I really like to hold space for. And so when we did the Aspen X Games dinner with at the Treehouse event in 2016, we did a multitude of infusions with magical butter and then pairings. And so we went back and forth between them, and it was a really exquisite event. And the year before Aspen X Games in 2015 was actually the first event that was ever approved by a municipality in the United States to put on an actual consumption event. And it was really special because at that point you just started seeing more independent government regulators really, stepping in to see, how they wanted to allow cannabis culture to kind of unfold in their city. And it was really special to be able to go through that. But for anyone out there that's thinking about doing this themselves, it's, we had 100, 150 no's before we get the one yes. It's just constant tending to these relationships. And a really important piece of advice that I always give people is, make sure you take the no with so much grace, because a lot of these companies you'll find want to participate with what you're doing, but they're so fearful about what what their existing clientele may think. And so they might not be ready. And typically, whenever they're not ready, they still want to gather a lot of information from you, so you get all hyped up like it's going to move forward, and then you get let down. But if you get let down with grace, I've seen so many times, a phone call 2 years later and say, hey, Philip, we want to do this now. And because they became ready and you handled everything in that relationship with them so well that it presented the opportunity to work with them in the future. So anyone who is trying to create experiences around the country where they may be at, you're going to get turned down a lot. Be cautious of how much energy and how much knowledge you're giving away, but make sure you present yourself in a way that's going to be very, again, I'll come back to the word graceful during that time where you figure out you're not going to work together.
Yeah, I think that, it's a very challenging thing for a business to, the way this would normally work is a business would go and hire a chef, the chef would come in and cater it for a big event, and everybody wins. But the second that those dollars go towards purchasing cannabis, that business is in peril, or so it's a real risk-adverse situation. I think that actually presents the biggest opportunity in this space because it allows chefs to be entrepreneurs, build a book for themselves, establish a following, and then go ahead and file and become a real corporation as we see the laws continue to evolve, like you've successfully done in Colorado. Can you give us a little bit about, how the laws are affecting your business?
Yeah, of course, the laws do affect our business, but what I was going to say was the expansion of our business as well. We also not necessarily just use cannabis, but we cook with psychedelics as well, with mushrooms, LSD, the variety. And this has also led to our retreats, in the healing journey retreats. So, cooking with psychedelics is more of a personal story for me. Back in 2021, I was diagnosed with a very rare lamin cancer. And while I was medicating myself with cannabis, I also noticed that mental health-wise, I needed something to help encourage me. And so we began experimenting then with cooking with psilocybin. And so that's really helped expand the business and expand, again, our retreats in the Virgin Islands. We do it in the BVI, because that right there is where the legalities come in. We've recently legalized in the USVI cannabis, so we're looking forward to embarking on our journey there as well. But we originated out of Detroit. It's called Cannabis Concepts. And in Michigan right now, both cannabis and psilocybin, all psychedelics, are pretty much decriminalized. So, that's pretty much how the laws affect our business. Operating as a chef, and this is why I try to get with more chefs, we're operating in a gray area. There really isn't a license for us. That's something that I've been with my colleagues to try to band together, because you've got to remember, the health department really can't be involved in the side of the business that we're in. So this is where we're operating in this gray area. So we're really, truly pioneering and taking so many risks, even though these things are legal. But it's a road that we must persevere.
Now, I want to go back to your retreat for just a second. all of us in this room, most of us, I would imagine, how many people have looked at a retreat or been at a retreat so far in the, okay? If you haven't looked or went, you should. But can you unpack a little bit about, do you think it's mostly first-timers going there? Are these mostly experienced people? What has been your experience in that?
Actually, we have a little bit of everyone. I work personally. I do a lot of one-on-one retreats, actually, where people come, where people have literally exhausted all of their options. They've done the traditional therapy, they've gone to their doctors, and they're truly looking for something groundbreaking. This is where all of our natural herbs, because we don't just necessarily use psychedelics and cannabis. Of course, we grow all of our natural herbs in the Caribbean, and so we incorporate this food along with the overall experience. The healing energy of the island vibe is something incomparable. Once you put that together with a program, we do something that way we can make sure all of our clients are receiving a specific treatment geared to their personal needs. This is where the one-on-one retreat, it's almost like, let's say, you're almost like coming to visit a friend. It's not any way typical. There's not, oh, here you have an hour to talk and then the therapy is up. This is literally, if you book 3-4 days, you have these entire days to completely decompress, to find the healer within yourself. We're looking to empower people. And that is the beauty of these retreats, along with the entire environment, the education, and the personal attention and care. It's absolutely amazing.
Can I say something to that? And thank you for that work so much, Gigi. It's so needed. But the key statement of what she said, and I hope the purpose that everyone is here for today, is that people have exhausted all options, and they come down to the Caribbean to do work with psychedelic medicines, to be able to find that healing within themselves, of whether it might be something mental or physical. And I hope that right there is what you guys find deep in your heart of why you're actually doing this work, because it's crazy that we want to see all of these science experiments. We want to do all these studies before we can legalize, but the basic sense of science is observation. And we can observe people healing from this, and the fact that people have to exhausted all options and then probably exhaust their income to travel to the Caribbean to take part in something like this is just absolutely crazy. And I really hope that, this is kind of the base, the foundation of what you stand on as you all do your work, of hearing that story right there. And yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Now, cooking with psychedelics is a whole nother world.
Yes, it is.
I founded a company called Magical Butter, and that was really the way that a lot of these edible companies came into the business originally. It gave them an easy way to make edibles at home. And we've also made some mushroom edibles and different psychedelic edibles. It's a much different space. And why don't we unpack it a little bit, because the level of care that you must take when you're going into a psychedelic dish versus a cannabis dish are massively apart as far as chef responsibility.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, obviously, dosage. This is where people are concerned. But I always tell people, as far as consuming cannabis or psychedelics, you don't have to smoke, you don't have to dab, but everyone has to eat. And this is where the nutrition accompanied with this wonderful medicine really takes place. This is how, this is where the magic happens for people. And to me, it's one of the most rewarding experiences to be able to help people in such a manner, because a lot of people are afraid of the look of it. But if it's, if I'm giving you a wonderful LSD demi-glaze, on your filet mignon there, it kind of takes the fear away from it. And this is where my job has been so rewarding, because I have had people's great-grandmothers. They trust me because they know the food, they know my background, and for the first time, they're actually embarking on things that they would never, ever think about. And then they come, they're like, oh, I feel so great. Wow, this is wonderful. And I'll make sure that I have the sauces and the things that I make, obviously in the proper containers and dosages so they can use it, throughout the time. They're like, this is the best way to microdose because of like a lot of things are a lot of sugar. And so when you can do things, like I said, like the sauce is more of a savory thing. It really helps people who are also like, keto and that kind of deal too. People who are watching their weight, people who have to eat a plant-based lifestyle. I mean, it doesn't get any better than you're really eating plants, it's really great.
Philip, what is your favorite dish to make? What is your favorite food to make?
Well, so I get that question asked a lot, but since I'm more of a kashom, a server and steward of cannabis, opposed to a chef, I really like to think about the terpene profiles that I like, to give it with the chefs, and so for those of you, how many people in here know what terpenes are? Okay, 3/4, that's good. So for those who don't know, terpenes are organic compounds that exist within all plants. They're in all fruits, vegetables, and they produce the aromas of the plants to attract pollinators, detract predators. And within cannabis, they're one of the compounds that actually give you the feeling that you feel. THC is a cannabinoid that gives you this high euphoric effect, but it's terpenes in what steer the ship. So there's over 200 different types of terpenes that exist within cannabis with kind of like a dominant 16 that you'll find in most strains. And then there's different levels of terpenes, right? So there might be, there's a multitude of terpenes and, there might be 2 or 3 that have a high percentage in that strain. So if you can use your nose to identify these layers of smells and then associate it to the terpene and then know what that terpene will do to you from a mood benefit, then you can actually identify how you're going to feel. And so I used to love strains that were really high in limonene and that were really high in pinene. So your golden goats of the world, your super lemon hazes of the world, and the limonene will make your mind very stimulated, very energized. It's almost like a shot of espresso. But then the pinene actually helps with focus and memory retention. And so I would be able to, take 1 or 2 hits of this in the middle of the day and just get totally zoned into work, And it was a huge benefit. But as my body changes, as my mind changes, as my spirit changes, my likes change as well. And you can sort of think about these terpene profiles as a central point of access of how they're going to make you feel. But all of our body, minds, and souls are different. And thank God all of our body, minds, and souls are different because it makes this world so much richer because of that. But our relationship to that central point can be different. There's some people who can drink coffee and it actually makes them feel relaxed, right? Or it over-energizes them so much they kind of will have a little bit of a panic attack type of feel. And so I started paying attention to what my relationship was to that profile, right? The limonene and the pinene, which really just smells like pine sol. And I just noticed that it started stimulating my mind too much. And so I've really laid off of that terpene profile, and something that I love now is linalool, which is lavender, that has a subtle essence of limonene behind it. So the lavender is going to be very relaxing, not like sedative where it gets you foggy or makes you want to sleep, but it just grounds you into your body. It feels like a heart opener. And then that little kick of limonene behind it is going to energize my mind, right? So I can still be very functional. It's very... How I use cannabis over the past year has been more throughout meditative states, nighttime, whenever I kind of do my prayer and rituals, and that's what's been calling to me. But that's going to change at some point. I don't know when, but that's what's serving me right now. And so those are some of the terpene profiles that I just really love. And some of the dishes that can go on with that, really with limonene, fish dishes, white meats and stuff is something that's going to be very complimentary of that. And so, oh my gosh, I was just going to try to speak to some of the dishes we've had soon, but I'm going to just leave it with the terpene profiles for right now.
Yeah, that makes sense, but the terpene profiles, I don't know if you caught the tail end of the cultivators session before this, but they did a great job on terpenes as well, and it is the baseline of everything we're doing here.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely the baseline, please.
No, I was just going to say, but aside from terpene profiles, like for myself, as an indigenous woman, we like to focus on the actual culinary history and journey when we do our dinners. We talk about all of these sacred ancestral ingredients that we're using in our food, and we pretty much take you on this entire journey throughout the Caribbean. I'm a multiracial woman as well, so I'm Vienquense, Mexicana, Africana, and Crucian, okay? So this is very much relevant to my food. So when you see this, like if you come visit me in San Croix, right? You are going to experience our Johnny cake, all of our delicious dishes, all of our tarts, and then again, with my mother being a Mexicana, okay, so now we go down a whole other different path.
LSD tacos?
Yes. Well, actually, that's how I got started. That was my claim to fame. No, it wasn't LSD, but we actually started, it was called Get Mexicated, okay? And we did we killed the cannabis cups with this, and we had all of our infused tacos, burritos, and quesadillas. And that really opened the door for me to start getting more, because I knew I always wanted to do fine dining, right? But again, sometimes, being a woman cultivator, it was kind of hard to break through. So I said, everybody's always raved about my family's food. And I'm talking about from my Vienquense, my Vieques side, to my Crucian side. All these dishes, people can come to our house and we can pop out anything. And I said, you know what? So we're going to take the tacos to the next level. I said, it's handheld, it's the perfect concept, it's stoner munchies, to the finest. And that really helped set off what I've been able to build today. And I'm just very grateful for the overall experience.
I was going to say, if you want to win a High Times Cannabis Chef of the Year, just put LSD in your dish, and then I'm sure you're going to win.
Yes, no, but my LSD dummy glaze is awesome. It really is.
That's pretty amazing. I have done very little in the psychedelic and food space. Like I said, just the mushroom side, but it's an area that I find incredibly fascinating, simply because the onset. And let's just chat a little bit about onset. One of the things you do to offset that is have them consume along the way. I find one of the challenges around any type of infused dish is it usually crosses a couple bounds. Somebody's also having some alcohol, and then they're eating and smoking, and then next thing you know, they're like, oh, I'm in a bad spot. And you're like, it's classic conversation that I think a few of us...
Or you get that phone call the next day of the day after effects. If it's not happening right there, they call, oh my God, the next day, yeah, well, you were drinking. It's like you really can't mix all of these things and expect this great outcome, especially if it's your first time. I always tell people, if you're not really familiar, do not mix.
Yeah, so for me, it's it's all about setting the space and the container from the very beginning, right? So whenever you're addressing people and you're opening up the space, really guide them to where do you want to go tonight? Ask them that. Let them know that this isn't all about consumption. This is about taking yourself to where you want to go. And then allow them or give them the invitation to say, hey, you don't even have to. So my typical format is, we do 3-course cannabis pairings dinners. This is our typical offering to the general public. And through that, it's 3 different courses paired with 3 different strains of cannabis. And so it's kind of like a smoke, eat, drink type of flow. And so I'd let them know, this isn't about mass consumption. You don't have to consume every strain. And if you're curious of how it's going to make you feel, take one hit and wait 5 or 10 minutes, check in with your body, and then see where you want to go from there. So the most important part is from the very beginning, set expectations and give allowances to saying this is not all about how much you consume or consumption. This is about tuning into your own body and where you want to go tonight, and follow that lead.
Yes, no, most definitely. I mean, it's basically comes down to it being a personal experience, and like you said, where are you trying to go? What is the ultimate objective? What are you trying to reach? And, to me, when you're advising people, again, this is why we do an intake form. And when I say I do dinners, I tell people I do a guided dinner. This is not just, oh, we're going to sit around, eat, get high, and have it. No, no. This is a guided dinner. I'm the captain of the ship, and here we're about to sail, you know? Hey. And so that way, when we do the intake form, we can kind of pretty much gauge what everybody's looking for, so we can personalize that experience so that we're not just giving everybody the same thing, and that you don't have these overwhelming or these underwhelming experiences, because you do have people that have veteran strength, okay? And they want something that's a little bit more intense than maybe the person next to them. Maybe the person next to them, it's their first time. So, you know, all that goes.
And I would imagine for Gigi, you know, being a chef, like having incredible food is important and incredible, but at the same time, you know, I would imagine your priority is being a guide first and a chef second.
You know, people say, like, my other nickname is Shaman Chef Gigi, okay, because it's a guided experience. We are using sacred ancestral ingredients. I don't even look at this as like, oh, we say cannabis, but these are things that my people have used for centuries. I come from a long line of curanderas, so this is something that we've used for centuries, and so it's very important.
That's where I was going to guide the conversation. It's fun that we just modified into it on its own naturally. But the chef, the sommelier, is really starting to become much more of a shaman, a spiritual guide. And the beauty that I think is, if you put a person on a couch and you try to get them to unpack their problems, they're already reserved, they're already going to have their ego up. When you put someone at a table and you're breaking bread with them, typically their ego is down, they're open for conversation, because just by nature, you don't feel like you're in the principal's office, you feel like you're in a friend's, you know, kitchen just talking about your life. And so I think that the impact that this could have on therapy long-term could be pretty profound.
That goes back to the retreats. So like I say, you can call it a retreat, you can call it a destination, because the whole time you're there, I'm feeding you.
LSD tacos?
Yes, LSD tacos. But this helps the client to relax in a different type of setting. It's almost like, oh, like I said, you're on like a vacation, so to speak, literally. You're on a trip, okay? But it allows you to relax and to disarm yourself and to really receive the actual therapy that's coming through this food, combined with education and the overall environment. And that's what's really important, I think, to actually receive the benefits that people are looking for, even at a dinner party, which they're great, and we do informative ones for people that are curious and stuff like that. But once you've gotten past that and you're looking for something more, coming to see me for a few days is the next level, and breaking through, finding how to be the healer for yourself.
Yeah, and I love how do you be the healer for yourselves. You know, this is a cannabis and psychedelics conference, but to me, I prefer the word entheogen, connecting with the divine within. And that's how I like to use these medicines personally, because we do all have the power within ourselves to do this healing, you know. But having guides is really important to be able to contain that as much as possible. And, you know, within that, I think it's like identify who you are as a guide, right? So, Gigi, you just sit next to her right now, and you just feel so relaxed and nurtured, and like, I mean, if you see her, go give her a hug, and like, you just feel that, you just feel that through your body, right? Like just this like calmness and like, oh my gosh, and the nurturing spirit, right? And for myself, you know, and so I think therapy can be unpacked in that, and you do a lot of one-on-one work.
Well, I'm also a licensed massage therapist and an esthetician.
Great.
So I know how to mix up and really like get to the muscles. I mean, when I tell you the experience, and it's not to brag, it's incredible, because it's about hitting all of the senses. First, you know, like the way through to your heart is through your stomach. Okay, and we open up your stomach, we open up your mind, we open up your body, we release the trauma and the muscles, because, you know, muscle stores memory.
Sure.
So we release all of that. This is the experience you have when you come see me. That's why I said it's way more, like, it started out back in the cannabis cup with the, the infused tacos, but my overall goal was to be able to come back home to St. Croix and to combine all of the history, the culture, and all of the natural, beautiful growing ingredients to create an experience that really helps people heal from within.
Yeah.
It's fun that you had mentioned the stomach as kind of the gateway to the body. And a lot of the science now backs this up about how important your microbiome is and having a balanced microbiome and how that actually completely changes your outcome in life. And a lot of the autoimmune disorders that people are dealing with now stem from some type of gut bacteria.
That's what happened with me when I was diagnosed with laminin cancer. These are neoplasms that grow in the stomach. I realized I had to not just change my diet, but change my entire way of being if I was going to beat this. And so, the gut health was very important. And let me tell you something, I feel like even though everything has changed so much, I feel so much better than I've ever felt in my life because I started with my gut, this is the brain. And then I was able to heal myself and go throughout my muscles, go to my brain, just basically start with curing myself through the gut. Yeah.
Well, bless your journey and sorry that you had that experience, and no doubt that's going to make you stronger and be able to spread your wisdom out through this world even more and more.
A walking testimony.
Yeah,
and I'm so happy. I literally I'm in remission as of September here.
Yeah.
So
Hey.
Thank you.
So, for me, as I was, kind of saying, what does your background, what does your education, what does your desire provide for you to hold space for people in a way that you are, let's just say, that's ethical for you to hold that type of space, right? And so, for me, I'm not a doctor. I don't focus on healthcare. I'm not a trauma therapist. I do have the ability to drop deep into space with people and listen and to hold containers for people. But in regards to me giving advice and stuff, I always stay away from that, even though I have some sort of ideas of how it may help. I don't cross the medical benefits of cannabis with people because it's just not what my background is. And I can to a degree, but I really state that from the beginning because it wouldn't be responsible for me to give this certain type of advice. And so what I do whenever I'm guiding these dinners and holding space is I'm teaching people how to optimize their cannabis consumption, how you can use it to enhance experiences, how you can use it to dive deep into creativity, how you can use it for pleasure, how you can use it for aspects of your lifestyle. And so I think it's really important to identify your voice within this and making sure that you're being in integrity with the guests who are there to experience your offerings and to show up in that way, and so I think you all could kind of say it's like, all right, if I'm with Gigi, then I could unpack some childhood traumas and stuff, and if I'm hanging out with Philip, then maybe I learn how to become a better artist, or maybe I learn how to use cannabis to write that business plan, and I'm not saying that Gigi won't be able to do that either, but I think you're all kind of understanding those different parallels of staying in your lane and then the importance of staying in your lane with what you're good at.
That's another reason why when we do some of our events, we also incorporate a nurse practitioner. We pretty much have a full line of everyone there, so that way people can receive the healing experience.
Yeah.
I think it's important. All of this is about improvement, whether it's medical improvement, psychological improvement, or social improvement. And in my experience, for different people, these plant-derived compounds offer that in a very unique way, in a way that's personal. The one thing that I do really enjoy about the combination of cannabis and food is you can encourage a healthy lifestyle. Like in infused salad, for example, all of us have weight, right? Like we come home, our minds are heavy, and you want to have a beer or a glass of wine or a cocktail to just kind of wash the day off of you. And what I know personally is if I have infused salad in my fridge, I may go and have an infused salad instead of that beer. And now, instead of putting things that are going to cause inflammation and destroy my microbiome, I'm putting nutrients in my body that will help resolve any issues I have and help my body combat inflammation and some of these properties that we've known to come and love and need. Inflammation is the root of nearly every disease state in this world. And I work with a lot of different Crohn's patients around the world, and the amount of relief that they've found through edible cannabis in particular it's too direct of a comparison to ignore. And the doctors, time after time, are completely amazed at the amount of resolution that these people get oftentimes in their colon. So when you're looking at things, IB issues and diverticulitis, I just think these are heroes up here preparing foods that really can help people maintain and sustain an enjoyable, magical life. So, I'd like to open the floor up for questions. Also, we'll give out a couple magical butter machines here to have some fun with everyone.
That's quite the gift right there. That's quite the gift.
Well,
I think the question was about the LSD demi-glaze.
we use a liquid, and we pretty much, the same way you would dose any kind of cannabis, it's weighed in its divided proportion.
There is one difference, though, and that is when you're making cannabis edibles, let's say you're making cookies or brownies or salad dressing, whatever you're making, you do have a tendency, like if there's something left on the spatula before you put it in the sink to lick it. You probably are not doing that quite as often with your LSD demi-glaze. Just going to go on the record for that one.
No.
So,
you want to be careful. No, it's pretty much per container. That way, it's accurate. Correct. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, so there's questions about educational resources in regards to like terpene profiles, learning about them, learning how they make you feel. Well, I'll give myself a plug here real quick, and then I'll direct you to some other places. But we're coming out with, as I kind of introduced myself as a Kashom, which is a server and steward of cannabis, this is a consumer masterclass course that we're looking to bring to market. We've been building it out for a couple of years, and we're going through the funding stage. And so I really hope that this is to market by the end of the year to really teach people how to optimize their consumption. This course is going to really reflect how I see this plant, how I use this plant. And it also incorporates kind of a wisdom, science, and application format, so we can kind of go beyond the scientific facts and to use a lot of theory within this as well, but ultimately guiding you to tune into yourself and the information that you want to follow and be really become good within that information or educated by that particular information. There is a lot of, there's a lot of information out there. There's a company called Gold Leaf. If you go to shopgoldleaf.com, and they have incredible educational posters, journals, and stuff like that. And in regards to like coming to this mixture of science focus, but also understanding what I just called kind of the wisdom focus, I feel like they do an incredible job with their work. But I'm excited to get my work out there to people because we've been developing this I've been on this path for 9 years with this particular company. And whenever I did all my research, it was actually around essential oils. So no one really knew anything about terpenes in 2013 when I started developing all of this. And there was like one article by Kyle Cushman and like one article on Leafly. And so I started studying doTERRA, which is a multi-level marketing essential oil company. And they have a lot of education materials for their sales reps, I guess. And that's what I studied to get a lot of this theory, and now you're coming up with a lot of information around it. But I'm kind of shocked that there's really not more out there in regards to how people can recognize their high. Like, who in the room has ever heard someone saying, you know, can you recognize your high before you even consume by connecting with the aromas of cannabis? I see 3 hands raised right now. You know, that's pretty ridiculous in my opinion. Same time, that's why Kashom is needed to the general public and by the end of the year.
Next question.
So I sat on a focus group a couple of years ago whenever I spoke in New York City at Star Chefs. And this focus group was like from like Tyson Chicken and Campbell's Soup and like, you know, really one of the biggest food makers in the world. And, you know, they had questions around it, you know, more so understanding the trends, more so wanting to create things that connect with certain customer demographics. And a lot of the things we had to say about cannabis was way too premature, and they understood that. So they really wanted to understand more so the cannabis consumer that wants more of the organic, farm fresh foods, what that means to them, you know, more locally sourced food items and everything is kind of where that directed from that conversation. I can't say that I've had anything with any of the big brands outside of that. But really, if you look at the beer companies, they're the ones who are really pushing forward cannabis beverages, and really, because they're starting to see alcohol with the younger generations, they're consuming less alcohol. So they're looking how to make up that, yeah, thank God, right? And they're trying to look how they can make up that market share. So I don't think like the Campbells or the Coca-Colas or anything are losing market share because of this right now. You know, Coca-Cola might say, oh, people are going to get high and then drink more Coca-Cola potentially. And I'm sure there's those people out there. So I don't think they're, I don't know where those types of brands are, but the alcohol brands are. And then also the kombucha brands. GTS, which is like my favorite kombucha, launched a cannabis beverage line in California. So I think you will start seeing some of those healthy choice beverages start diving into THC drinks as things continue to expand.
I had some discussions with InBev several years ago with their venture capital arm. One of my businesses is a biotech out of Israel, and it's surrounded around the drug delivery of cannabinoids and getting them into the body and where you want to deliver the molecule. So the challenge that a lot of these companies have is their consumer packaged goods where the profitability is on the number of units you consume. And if you think about a beer, you know, Budweiser, for example, somebody may have 5 beers during a football game. Well, you metabolize alcohol essentially 1 beer per hour. We get the basic gist of it. Game's 3 hours long, so the person had 5 beers, they're going home with 2 beers in their system. It's kind of the way it works. With cannabis, it's a compounding effect, not the opposite way around. It's not leaving your body. It's actually you've overconsumed because you've had 2 or 3 cocktails or mocktails before that actually entered the bloodstream. So the key to really making these products, national brand products, is around being able to bilk the customer out of more money by them having a shorter experience.
Awesome. I think she had a question too back there.
So there are newer versions, but the base functionality is heat, time, and agitation. And so you're not outdated in that respect. We do have some new units coming out later this year. I intentionally made them where the head of the unit would retroactively work with the old bases to service our customer base. We do have 500,000 customers in 22 countries, so I didn't want to leave anyone with a device that they felt was outdated. But yes, it's the Seattle Mariners used it for many years to, and they still may. I don't have my place right there next to the stadium anymore, but I know that the Seattle Mariners used it forever, making their soups, sauces, salad dressings for the stadium, because they make very boutique flavored foods because it's such a foodie town. There's a ton of restaurants. One of my favorite restaurants in Tampa, Cafe Ponte, they use our machine to make their old fashions. And so it's used by a lot of different people for a lot of different things, because it just puts you in control of a consistent finished product. And whether you're making LSD tacos or
you want some of those LSD
I do want some
tacos.
LSD tacos, right? I wanted the demi-glaze, but I got scared when I saw myself licking the spatula.
Oh my gosh.
Next question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you will see more push for cannabis beverage products, because what we're finding out with, people are starting to extract THC from hemp products, that are 0.3%, and then just compounding that together to make higher percentage THCs, and they think they can ship it all over. And there's this new gray area that people are really unsure what to do with. I was just speaking with someone earlier today about walking into convenience stores in Chicago and seeing waters that have 3% THC in it because they're getting around it in that sort of way. So if the Farm Bill does heighten that threshold of how much THC can be in it, then it's just going to make it easier for people to create those types of products. So I think it's absolutely something that's going to continue to get bigger and bigger, because all of a sudden, you don't have to be a license holder, and you can sell all over the United States. So why would you want to be a license holder in California to sell, your canned drinks or something like that, whenever you can do it this back end and sell all over the country? Now saying that, I don't know if it would be my preference of intake, because of how much material would need to go in to make, a beverage that's, 2 or 3 milligrams of THC in it. Because I do think of that as a consumer, but, Delta 8 is more represented here in Cannadelic than, Delta 9 is. So I think you're just really going to see, because that's giving people access to step into this industry without much barrier. I think he's asking you if you want to invest.
Yeah,
I want to see if you invest in it.
I've taken a lot of looks at the space. I do have some concerns with the way that people are going about doing the hemp gummies. The DEA was very clear on Delta 8 that it's in bounds, which I think is incredible. Seeds are in bounds now, which I also think is incredible. I like this new DEA. That's probably the first time I've ever said that in my life. But my challenge really is the way that they're calculating the 1%. They're doing some fuzzy math by calculating it back against the weight of the gummy, and they're squeezing 15 milligrams into a gummy, 10 milligrams into a gummy. I think it's the same thing as the Delta 8 stuff. Essentially what's happened is when you make a ton of CBD isolate, you're using silica gel chromatography to separate the compounds, the molecules. Well, if you do enough kilos of CBD or hemp, you wind up with a shit ton of pure THC. So it's easy to get the derived THC from hemp, but I'm not willing to take that risk personally. It's not a space that interests me. I think there's no barrier to entry, so I think the business model is very difficult. As we've already seen, the same thing happened with CBD, the same thing happened with Delta 8, and I would imagine the same thing is going to happen with edibles and products that are derived from THC that came from hemp. I think there's going to be a shock in price originally per kilo. It'll drive down to near the cost of production because everybody and their brother will start making it until the margin is zero. And then you just have a bunch of washed out brands again. And we've seen it with CBD. We'll see it with Delta 8. And I think eventually we'll see it with with the new hemp THC products.
I think we're ready to wrap it up. So.
All right, guys. Hey, on behalf of everyone up here, thank you.
Yeah, can we just
Thank
give a
you,
shout out
everybody.
where we find ourselves?
Yeah.
Gigi, where do we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at hightimes_ top cannabis chef Gigi. You can also find me at Cannabis Concepts on my website there. And on LinkedIn, you can find me at Gigi DS.
Awesome. And yeah, you can find, I would just go to my personal Instagram page, and then there's links to all my projects from there. At Philip_Wolf_, Philip with one L, Wolf just like the animal. Yeah.
And we'll do a quick Magical Butter giveaway. My email address is angel@magical.com. The first 2 emails I get will get Magical Butter machines. You can find me on Instagram at GarenAngel, at Magical, or at Magical Butter. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Great
Thank
panel.
you, everybody.
Awesome. I'm trying to get some of that magical butter. Email
Lindsay,
sent
do you
from
mind
2
taking
different
a
email
photo?
addresses. All right, everybody. We've got another panel coming up
Lindsay.
right now. So if you want to grab a photo with these rock stars, now's your chance. Flag them down off stage. If not, the next panel I think is super, super important and something that doesn't get talked about enough. And we have Joe Moore of Psychedelics Today moderating that panel, and I think he's probably the most qualified person here to moderate it. So the panel is called Are Psychedelics for Everyone? And I think that, again, in this day of performative social media advertising, you'd think that you just take psychedelic once and it's going to cure any condition you have, and there might be some nuance to that topic. So this idea and the panel are titled Are Psychedelics for Everyone? And I want to turn the mic over to them because I'm sure they're going to be able to fill up this panel with a lot of impressive content. So you ready to rock and roll, Joe? Let's go, baby. All right, here we go. Give it up one time for Joe Moore and for Psychedelics Today for being title sponsors here. What's up, everybody? Oh, Lucas is on that. Say hello.
How many of us are there? This looks like it. Let's do it. All right, everybody. We have a fun event ahead of us right here. Our Psychedelics for Everybody. But first, I'm Joe Moore, CEO of Psychedelics Today. Happy to be here. We do education and media in the space, have for about 7 years or so. And we have a really fun-filled panel. I think we're going to have a really robust conversation here, everybody. I've been thinking about it. Oh, yes, fantastic. Glad you're here too, sir. This is going to be great. So today, are psychedelics for everybody? And how, this is a really, we could write about 10 volumes, I think, on this. So I'm really pumped. But want to introduce the panel. Actually, have you all introduce yourselves because I can't get my paper open.
You were going to do it.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. But let's start with Joey here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joey Lichter. First of all, thank you all for sticking around for day 3 and coming to this talk. I'm a chemistry professor at FIU down here in Miami. I'm also the advisor for the FIU Psychedelics Club, which I see some of the students here. And I want to say on stage publicly a thank you to Joe Moore and Psychedelics Today, because this past summer we hosted Cannadelic FIU, which was a 2-day conference at FIU with researchers from Hopkins and Ohio State. And at the last minute, we had some issues with the university, kind of making some red tape we had to get through. But Psychedelics Today came through and really helped with sponsoring us and making it happen. So thank you, Joe. But happy to be here and talk about, I teach a course on psychedelics too, and happy to share my thoughts today.
Hello, my name is Tracy Stansbury, and I'm with Lotus Entheogenic Church. We just founded the second church in Oakland, and our mission is to make plant medicine accessible to everyone. Our purpose is to make sure that the donations that we receive, we're able to subsidize medication specifically to the houseless population in West Oakland and try and reverse the opioid crisis.
My name is Lucas Gerler. I am the CEO of Liquid Gold Consulting, a cannabis and psychedelic consulting company, been around for 8 years in the space. I am the COO of Panacea Plant Sciences. We are a Intel out drug development company. We own 1 patent, have 13 pending, and do a lot in, like last year, for fighting the DEA. And then we also are reciprocity focused. 33% of our equity into perpetuity goes to indigenous groups or 503c(b) nonprofits, environmental groups. And then I'm also starting a PAC in the process of it on the request of the White House. That PAC won't be specifically focused on psychedelics, but that will be the end goal, to advance psychedelics and things like the payer systems and things like that.
My name is Jeff DeMond. I have a nonprofit called The Grateful Veteran. It helps veterans find cannabis free of charge from a doctor that'll see them, and then I raise money to pay the $77.75 to help, with the opioid crisis among veterans. But inevitably that leads into a conversation about psychedelics because, cannabis can only take you so far in your healing journey. So my wife and I have been in this space about, 5 years now and helped over 500 some veterans. But I've done Cannadelics with Joey, and it's always nice to be back amongst some way more intelligent people than I. I'm an experienced user of, so that's what I bring to the table, is that I'm real. I have a tendency to be able to connect real well to the veterans and get my point across so that there's a little bit less fear and angst amongst them to use psychedelics or cannabis as medicine.
Beautiful, thank you for that. So I kind of want to get right to it, the heart of the matter right away. So from all the hype and fanfare, it really does look like psychedelics are for everybody based on what we're seeing on TV, right? But let's start by saying they are not for everybody. And Joey, maybe you can start us off, like why might psychedelics not be for all patient populations or people?
Sure. So my students are going to know this is like class, this is day 1 in class. The term psychedelic, it gets thrown around to describe a whole lot of different compounds, but you have the sort of classical psychedelics, so the tryptamines like LSD and psilocybin and DMT that have this indole ring that's very specific that make these drugs bind to serotonin receptors. And then things like MDMA, which is lumped in there, but it does not target the same place in the brain. It's a different type of compound, but it still has association and is kind of called a psychedelic. Same with ketamine, which is this NMDA receptor antagonist. The reason I would say psychedelics are not for everyone is that, first of all, if we were to look biochemically at who has a certain amount of serotonin receptors, we're going to see that people are different and that each person's receptors bind differently. So ultimately, if you're trying to get something out of it, there are people that will respond differently. Now, we don't have the tools in place that can, right now, you can go to a place and say, hey, how's my 5-HT2A receptor doing? Am I good? But there are things we know from research that indicate what's the likelihood that someone's going to have an adverse reaction. There was a great paper that came out in 2021 from a group in Ohio State that actually looked at all of the clinical trials to try to figure out what were those traits that were predictors of adverse reactions, and a lot of them were things like apprehension. The actual traits that were good, that led to good experiences, were things like openness and absorption. So probably everybody here at Cannadelic who's kind of open to cannabis and the psychedelics is probably going to have a good experience with psychedelics. But somebody who goes to, their therapist and says, I'm struggling, but they deal with a lot of neuroticism, maybe they have family history of schizophrenia or psychotic disorders, they may not necessarily benefit. They may actually end up going into a much darker place. So I think, it's sort of important to think about your family background, your set and setting, obviously, right? So I would say it's not for everyone, and the best way to kind of know is if you're here, it's probably for you. Yeah.
I have a university philosopher friend who actually really likes negative experiences. When he describes them to me, I'm horrified. But he really digs it.
There's the talk about is it a spiritual emergence that's taking place, or is it psychosis? Again, it's the framework that you look at. I mean, at the end of the day, do you want to have this psychotic experience? If you do, then
if you're into that sort of thing, yeah. So, anybody else have anything else on who might not want to consume psychedelics?
Well, I was just going to say, just in general, I look at psychedelics as a human right. The access to them is a human right, and then from there, are they right for everybody? I think that, again, goes back to completely an individual health that can change also on a monthly basis. So things that aren't available, that are able to be done, like looking at your DNA and seeing what could happen, right? The access to those things can be increased. We could work with the VA and we could say, start there, right? From there, we could go out and say, bring it to the regular population, but you have to, with psychedelics being for everybody, the problem comes, things like CBD just happened, right? Where the FDA said, we don't know what the fuck to do with this shit, right? That's what they just took their time to say. And the reason is because there's so many things that it can do where it can help you, but it can also hurt you. So if you're taking a drug, you're epileptic and your drug is working, you can take CBD and it'll actually make the drug work better. And then all of a sudden, a side effect of too much of that drug is that you have more epileptic seizures, right? And so, is it for everybody? Yes. I think the access to it should be for everybody. And then from there needs to be a lot more studying of, hey, this very specific tryptamine, how does it react with this THCA inside of the genetic sequence from this background, from this person that's at this age, that is living here, that is exposed to these things?
I think it's also important to consider the person's trauma in their life, at the time that they take it. No, it's not for everyone. It's not for a 15-year-old at a rave that is susceptible to any types of assaults or that sort of thing. Like, this is something that needs to be addressed in the community. It's not for everyone. It should be also taken into consideration, like, where is that person in their life? Did they just go through severe trauma? Then psychedelics probably is not the best option for you right now. If you're going through a severe grieving process or you are experiencing something that is heavy, it's probably not a time to do that, especially if it's your first time. I think that those things need to be considered. So no, yes, it is for everyone, but not for everyone at the same time.
Exactly, and especially with veterans, the same type of thing if they're experiencing some sort of trauma and you don't know where they are in their healing process. And, psychedelics may be overwhelming for them, especially if they do something, far more powerful than they should, not knowing and just trying to heal themselves without some guidance. Veterans tend to want to medicate themselves, and so yes, it is for everyone, but no, not always at the same time.
I think the guidance part you just talked on is really important.
Yeah,
the
education
therapy
for
part,
real, yeah.
the community, the group work, things like
Right.
that. Everybody, I think, up here in the past has said that, but it has to be a part of it.
Yes.
I don't think that the drugs can just, let's say, fix you. It's a healing mechanism and part of a continuous process.
One other thing I just want to add is if you look at people with addiction, there are studies that show psychedelics can help but they're very specifically with psilocybin, right? They're not with MDMA, they're not with ketamine, which we know have some addiction potential. So again, very key is what psychedelics are we talking about?
Right.
And I think we also,
We'll get back to that one. And yeah, there are specific psychiatric indications we do want to stay away from. So, check out contraindications on each of these substances when you're evaluating them. And an evaluation period is important. If somebody hands you a big bag of mushrooms, don't just go into your closet, eat it, and come back out. Maybe take some time, do some research. And you could. I did before this, but
The demi-glaze with the LSD from before, I was kind of into that, though. That sounded interesting.
that was all right. Yeah. So there are people that shouldn't, and there are medications that do interact inappropriately. So people would have to potentially withdraw from those under professional supervision to avoid any kind of major risks. So there are some scenarios. So next up, though, is who are maybe some of the ideal candidates for psychedelics? Who might actually have a more optimal experience from psychedelics, both religiously, clinically, and perhaps recreationally as well?
Veterans.
Yeah.
Veterans. It's hard, and they don't want to ask for help, and they want to be, helped along a little bit. They need some guidance, but they want other vets involved. But the psychedelics that, I've helped other people get to other places than I am in my journey, farther than I am, and to see the physical change in their facial features because they feel so much better about themselves mentally and in touch with their body. It's really a powerful thing. So that's why I can't stop talking about it. I mean, I use mushrooms on a daily almost, and I want to try other things, and I want to learn about other things so that I can speak more intelligent about the process. But I know so many other veterans that have, well, even on our last venture at the last Cannadelics, we spoke about different forms of psychedelics that have helped veterans and on different journeys in different countries even that veterans are traveling to try and get more help. And they deserve it. And you don't have to be a combat vet to have some trauma, and it doesn't have to be even militarily related. But that sure does compound things a lot.
I think it's important that it's accessible to everyone who wants to do it as well, and we have to take into consideration that most of the population has an aversion to therapists, psychiatrists, doctors, and the mental health system because it's failed them. There's been overprescription, there's been a lack of resources, and not everyone is gonna run to their therapist for psychedelics. They're probably gonna talk to their friends and say, hey, do you know someone who has this, who can help me with this? And look for someone has the psychedelic experience, who's done the journeys, who has the years of doing mushrooms, and not a therapist who just has a degree, but took a couple trips and now took a class and is offering psychedelic therapy. They're not gonna trust you. And so you have to leave avenues open for accessibility for people who have aversion to modern medicine.
And that really speaks to the veteran too, because they're as soon as they've been done wrong by the VA, they feel cheated already, and they don't want to go back, and they don't want to ask for more help somewhere else, and it turns into a spiral a lot of times until I feel like when COVID happened, a bunch of us veteran networks kind of connected. So I feel like it's much better now, and we're catching people as they fall through. But until they run into someone like me or another veteran out there that speaks on cannabis or psilocybin or another unit, they wander around trying to figure it out on their own, and they're going to self-medicate. So it's important to talk about it and have veterans involved.
Right. My ex-husband is also a combat veteran, and he had PTSD. Yeah. And he would not go to the psychiatrist. He would not go to get therapy because there's a massive stigmatization within the community to go and seek help.
About every month, they asked me I'd get a new therapist, and they'd say, so tell me your story again. I'm like, seriously? Are we really going to do this again? I really connected to one therapist, and he asked me to tell me my story, and I told him it all. I told him the whole story, and he went back to doing children. So
I think another group
that's harmful.
It is.
I think another group that's likely to have good experience are people who consider themselves religious or spiritual. Because to engage with a mystical experience, you have to be open to that even being something that can be possible. There's a lot of famous experiments. Again, I'll be looking for my students to know about the Good Friday experiment, done in the '60s with Timothy Leary and Walter Pankey, where they gave seminary students psilocybin. It's a great story because Harvard didn't want them to do it, and they kind of cut off their psilocybin supply. So they went to the streets to go find access to it, and they still did the experiment. And they gave, to 20 seminary students, 10 of them they gave psilocybin, 10 of them they gave niacin. And Good Friday being this, story of the rebirth of Jesus Christ, and they were in the chapel listening to a sermon about rebirth, and of the 10 that ended up with psilocybin, it changed their lives, all of them. So I think people who are spiritual, who are even happy with their religious denomination, whether it be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatnot, they will likely still benefit from, I think, the experience.
Yeah, there's huge populations of the recreational scene too that would benefit. Right now, two of the more dangerous drugs on the market are government-endorsed alcohol and nicotine, and psilocybin and LSD being the safest, according to Dr. David Nutt's 2009 or 10 study in The Lancet. It's just a really interesting thing that our government that's supposed to be keeping us safe is not, seemingly on purpose. And we need to develop alternatives here. And the recreational space needs to be really radically, intervened in. Cannabis is wonderful, but we need to go a little further.
And I think it's important too that we don't control the setting. Not everybody wants to lay in a chair with a blanket and a blindfold with
Amen.
headphones listening to classical music. Sorry. Some people want to go into the woods and go hiking. Some people want to listen to music in a group setting and dance. There's nothing to say that that isn't therapeutic on a level as well. Laughing with friends, enjoying a good time, dancing, laughing, all these things are super therapeutic on so many levels that it shouldn't be like, oh, that is recreational and therefore not therapeutic, and it has to be in a controlled setting. That may not be for some people. That may make this worse.
That's the one risk with the Oregon model, right?
Yeah.
Is that the model that's existing now in the one state that has these treatment centers is that you have to go to a treatment center. And for anybody who's done psychedelics, it's sort of an anti-establishment feeling. Like you don't necessarily want to be forced to be stuck in a place in order to do it. So yeah, we're going to see how that plays out.
I mean, I understand that they're trying to go the avenue of legalization through research and therapy and showing data points for that, but LSD and mushrooms were to open your mind and to realize that there's more to life than these boxes. So why would you force it back into that? It's going to backfire on you.
Well, I think it just comes down to recreational and medical uses. I personally hate the term recreational.
Same.
It's bullshit.
It really is.
Anytime I was in the medical market here in Florida, having to make that distinction between, that's recreational or medical. Personally, it's like everybody that is doing something recreational probably has a medical need for it. They just maybe don't accept it, acknowledge it, even know it. So I think part of the conversation that I wanted to interject, though, would be, does everybody have the right to access all drugs the way that they are? This, I guess, like the synthetic versus, let's say that we open access for everything. If you're opening access for something, then you have to supply it, and then that's when the issues come in. So I think that you also have to just understand that there's actual operational things that have to happen, actual payer networks that have to be set up and things like that. It's not just as easy as just saying, hey, this drug is legal or illegal. When you talk about giving it to an under 18-year-old kid, right? There's different things that you might have to go through to do so.
Yeah, under 21 sounds more clinical to me, honestly. But one of my favorite taglines here, folks, is I'm not done this fight until I'm buying LSD at Walmart without a prescription, which is going to be about 200 years, but I'm going to act like it's 5 years out.
I want to discuss the age thing too, because in that paper that I was sharing with you from Alan Davis's group, they looked at the age question and found that the older the participants, there seemed to be a lesser likelihood of some of the mystical experiences. So there's a question of whether or not young people really could benefit as to where the cutoff is. I don't know.
So it's too late for me.
It was eye-opening for me at like 12, 13, things like that, right? I don't know when everybody else started doing
Rick Doblin
recreational.
said at a conference in Amsterdam that he offered his kids when they turned 13 to either do MDMA or smoke pot with him and his wife, and they declined. And he said that's the best way to get your kids not to do drugs is to offer to do it with them.
Make them smoke a whole pack of cigarettes. That's the
But
whole
I
idea, right?
chatted with him about that afterwards, because I was like 13, and then he got into some deep stuff with me about Judaism, bar mitzvah. 13 is the age of adulthood. So, he believes strongly that psychedelics are part of his own maturation into adulthood. If his children reach teenage years, maybe that's when they could experience that as well.
They don't become a man until you're 38, though, I believe. Like 38, 39, like
I'm still a kid.
right? Like you're. I don't know.
And there is actual clinical research happening with people, I believe, with ketamine for ketamine-assisted psychotherapy at very young ages in real time, like as young as 5 or 6 years old, because of various surgical traumas and really serious psychiatric and body situations that are happening as a result of that. So,
And there's some old studies, if anybody's really interested. Loretta Bender in the 50s was looking at LSD with children with autism on psycholytic amounts, very small amounts, not the psychedelic, mystical stuff. But again, whether or not that was too young.
Well, I also think that young women suffering from eating disorders and OCD, like that obviously needs to be open for them as well. There can't be a cutoff with age. But as far as people that provide them in churches like I do, like we definitely have a cutoff on age. We're not,
What's the cutoff?
21.
yeah, and that's a really conservative good number, but if we look at UDV and Santo Daime, I believe it's much younger. And I think the role of government in this scenario might only be for this quote-unquote recreational thing. The clinical thing and the religious thing should be really outside of their purview, except for, as far as helping regulate clinical practice to some degree. So I want to take a little bit of a spin here, and this will be a little dark. So hold on. So in the last few years, we've actually had some exposés on a few really big situations where there was some pretty aggressive abuse in the psychedelic space. There's one famous case from MAPS about 7 years ago or something. The couple was promptly fired. And then there was a really large cult in San Francisco that got broken up, and there was a monstrous amount of abuse happening there. Some of my friends were very personally hurt by that situation. And I'm wondering kind of what did we learn from all of this, and how can we make clinical psychotherapy safer? So there is just this standard of, a certain baseline of abuse in psychiatry, psychology, therapy, et cetera. When you add in psychedelics, it shifts the dynamic a bit. We don't have clear data because the drug war has made it secret, and it has disincentivized people from coming forward. So, what have we learned? What can we do to help with this situation?
First of all, therapists shouldn't fuck their clients.
It's already in the rules, though, right?
First thing.
Yeah.
You need to, if you're having any type of festivals, like Rainbow Valley gatherings that have been going on since when they're 80s and are known stomping grounds for pedophiles, there needs to be some sort of vetting process as to who you let into these festivals. You don't let sexual predators into places where people are on psychedelics, and that's something that isn't addressed in the rave scene in Rainbow Valley, in any of these ongoing circles. And these people need to be excluded from these events because they're creating a lot of damage. where
How would you propose we do that?
Megan's Law.
Not familiar.
Megan's Law is where there's a sexual registry, a registry on sex offenders. So you just run their ID, do a little background check before you let someone buy a ticket or before you let them through the door.
It's an
There's
interesting
probably
concept.
more people that have committed something that haven't been caught, though, would be the issue. I think that if somebody is truly sitting with the medicine, is true to themselves, they would not fuck their client, right? I think that's probably an issue, but there is also a thing that, like, I truly believe that anybody that is a healer is usually, like, going through the chaos with their people. It's not like you're over here, like you're in the chaos with somebody. And so I think it's a true person that is truly looking to help somebody out and is truly sitting with the medicine wouldn't cross that boundary. But, you know, those things exist, and that's why it's important, I guess, to make it public when they do happen. I don't necessarily need to shame somebody more than that would be shameful, making it public, but I think that those things are going to happen in any setting or place. I don't think you can eliminate them completely, but I think you can train people and have, like, specific, let's say, training around it, that, like, hey, you have to go to this sort of a sensitivity thing, right, whatever that is, for it, that it makes it such in the forefront that when they do commit it, it's a very known thing, right? You can probably change paperwork when people are signing up, make it, hey, this could happen, sign here that you'll tell us, things like that, like, we want you to come forward. Like, there's different ways to make it known that, hey, this stuff happens, as opposed to just saying, hey, because we're in psychedelics and we're all love and shit, that we don't have this stuff in our community, right?
Yeah, like a PSA for it. You could shoot a
Dare I say, we should not try to silence those who speak out against the abuses that take place in psychedelics.
Exactly. They need to feel comfortable and in a safe space to come forward. If you're creating a safe space and you violate that egregiously, you should feel comfortable to come to your cohorts and be able to say this happened, and that person should not be allowed to continue that.
Right, but we also don't want to use those as weapons against us, and so I think that's the issue that people are, is like, hey, if we're, we probably fight ourselves, cannabis industry itself, more than anything else, right? As opposed to truly coming together. It would be something that, you know, if we all truly come together, have certain ethics, if you have a stamp of an organic type of a thing that somebody has to go through and ethically abide by, or they lose that stamp, right? There are ways that you can enforce ethics and rules without necessarily being there in the room.
Problem being is the drug war excludes us from
Yeah,
being
that's-
able to be open about this in a way that doesn't put people at risk of incarceration and further harm, right? It's a really complex situation, compounded by the drug war. I've seen about 10 or 12 different situations that I've personally been involved with, and the drug war got in the way of every single one of them and created more silence than an abuser would make on his own, or her own in some cases as well. And yeah, there's also some predatory situations I've seen where, say for example, somebody came into a bunch of money, went to a psychedelic retreat, was grieving, you know, related to that money coming into their life because of loss or something, and getting extorted by facilitators for large sums of money. And this kind of stuff does happen, folks, so be careful out there. You really want to vet the people you're working with extensively. You know, you have a conversation here in the hallways, you found out about some great ayahuasca center, you think, and then you show up and who knows, you know, really, I personally suggest people get at least 3 points of reference from different groups of people before you make any kind of commitment. And in underground facilitation in illegal markets like we have here, it's similarly complex. Yeah, and just because you're attached to some big organization doesn't necessarily mean that you're super ethical. It could, you know, I'll use Catholic Church as an example. Yeah. So.
What happened there? I'm not familiar.
Grew up Catholic. I can't talk about it. So.
You know, I'm going to add something else too. This is a little bit of a sidetrack, but we've been talking about this in my class that so in 2006 there was one of the seminal papers of the psychedelic renaissance was this paper from Griffiths and Johns Hopkins that said, you know, psilocybin could create these mystical experiences in participants and ranked as the top 5 most mystical experience in their life, on par with seeing their firstborn child and getting married. And so if that's true, and if psychedelic researchers have at some point in their life taken psychedelics, how much of the research that we are listening to and believing as saying how helpful these drugs are for certain things are driven by people's experience and bias and incapable of even seeing, the potential adversity as clear as the adversity could be because of their own psychedelic use, right? So I think we all have to be aware that everything we hear and read, there is a caveat that it could be driven by an excitement from the people who are doing the work, from the people who know they've had good experiences, but have been casualties, people who have been taken advantage of, people who have struggled quietly with a really bad psychedelic experience that they couldn't integrate, that they couldn't deal with because they didn't know who to talk to about it. Depersonalization is one of those great examples where people start to feel weird, they can't leave their house, and we don't hear about those things, but they happen,
And we can go further here and say not all published data should be believed hook, line, and sinker, right? The great Saint Timothy Leary said, think for yourself and question authority, and we should be really taking that to heart and looking further.
Timothy Leary was handing psilocybin to all of his students as well.
Yeah, it helped them question authority.
Well, to the bias, all the funding is in proving yourself right. None of the funding is in proving the other person wrong.
Right, and further, science, to be good science, should be replicated, right, and replicable elsewhere, and that is really not happening. There's a big
pay for it?
crisis in clinical psychology and academia in general about this. You'd be the first to publish on something, otherwise you might not get tenure or something.
We did see in the last 2 years some really, I thought, healthy argumentation between leading psychedelic research groups. In particular, Robin Carhart Harris's group published some work on psilocybin and depression and what was going on in the brain, and the Hopkins group came out and said, hey, you did a one-tailed test instead of a two-tailed test that changes all your stats. And so we're seeing some healthy argumentation of the data, I think. And a little bit of personal...
Didn't look too healthy to me. They could have done it in a much more polite and professional fashion. But yeah, that's this space. Everybody's really amplified and really trying to fight for territory. But yeah, it was good debate and there was progress made in the discussion, for sure. Back to this ethics topic, Jeff, I'm sure when you're talking to veterans about how to find access, you have to tell them how to be safe. Could you mention anything about that, how you suggest people make the right decisions?
So there are some communities that, there are some veteran networks, and I think, Joey, you probably remember Ron Millward. And there are a few, there's a West Coast one called Veterans Walk and Talk, and they are psilocybin driven, like where they do adventures out in the woods with, walking in the forest and whatnot. I always talk about set and setting and being ready for your experiences, especially in your head, before you start anything, and always should be safe in some safe place. I really like what's happening now with the ability to kind of measure out doses and extract and be safe in a medical setting. And I don't necessarily believe that you have to be in a medical setting, but there are certain drugs I feel like you should be in a medical setting. So I know a lot of the ketamine doctors and the ones that are using, psychedelics, and I try to direct veterans to them for more information. But, mushrooms are always the easiest way in. And once I think a veteran can safely medicate themselves and feel a little bit of relief from whatever might be hanging on their back, they're more open to trying something else. But always at a low dose is what I talk about, because you never know who or what they're dealing with exactly.
So you got to definitely know the source, and then testing shit. So how many people know anybody that's died of fentanyl? Were they trying to take fentanyl? Keep your hand up.
No.
They were trying to take fentanyl? So there's a couple.
Well, no.
Right? Most people that die from fentanyl are not trying to take fentanyl. It's just inside the shit that they're trying to take, right? safe access and being able to test your shit and know exactly what's in it is very important. But because of the stigma around things, everything is driven down, and you don't sit out here and say, hey, I'm the grower over here. But wouldn't it be great if you knew the fucking grower?
Right.
Right? We can get there, but it'd be all of us just saying, it's like prohibition. If you go to court and you have a judge, he's probably going to do judgy shit. Right? If you have your peers, they're probably going to do peer shit. You can, what is it? You refuse to find them guilty, right? And so we are the people. It's up to us as the people to create that safe access space. These machines are out there. Somebody can go buy one and put it in a center. They can go bring it down to the VA in their local community. These things are happening. They're just happening at such a small scale. It doesn't affect the larger issue, which is that people want drugs. It's was the cartel make like $25 billion a year selling drugs to the U.S.? It is a market because we want them. But the cleanliness of them, what they would be made of, who's making them, all of that shit, the issues around it is a lot more than just talk, right?
I definitely would encourage people to stick around for the next session too, because I know that Dustin Robinson and Courtney Barnes are trying to do stuff here in Florida, legislation, writing stuff to get it out there. So access in the state could be,
And state level is important, but federally is also important as well.
Yeah, we need action on all fronts, folks, right? So from the psychedelic perspective with fentanyl, you wouldn't expect to see fentanyl in mushrooms. I don't actually even think that's shown up yet in any labs anywhere. But what has shown up is in Canada, maybe about a decade ago or 7 years ago, there was a large sheet of Albert Hoffman blotter paper that you would think would be LSD, and it was actually 100% carfentanil. And so we have to be careful. We should be testing. Test kits for fentanyl cost $1 to $2, and everybody should have them. And people, if you're consuming, don't consume alone. And please try to buy Narcan or naloxone. There's hundreds of pharmacies in this area where you can get it for free, and it could save you or your friends' lives. So
Even
if you're,
you don't use, you should
Amen.
have it, because you never know if you're out in public and you see someone and you could save someone's life.
Agreed.
It's
Yeah.
very simple. It's very inexpensive. Have it in your purse at all times or in your pack or whatever.
And you can get trained on how to use it in about a 10-minute video on YouTube. It's a little ridiculous, but it's honestly life-saving. And again, I'll reiterate, the whole reason for this level of harm and risk is because of the drug war. If it wasn't for the drug war, so many lives would have been saved, so much rainforest acreage would have been saved.
Yeah, one of the events that the FIU Psychedelics Club does is Narcan training, and it's been really good to see. So
Yeah, I used to be a board of director member at the Psychedelic Club. I don't know if you guys knew that. I dropped out recently, but busy.
you can come join ours.
All right, cool. That'd be cooler. Yeah. So specifically, Joey, what kind of psychiatric disorders might be excluded from clinical trials? And I think this can inform kind of a more broader access audience.
If people aren't aware, a lot of the research does exclude people who have bipolar disorder, family history of psychotic disorders, or schizophrenia. And these are often comorbid with things like depression and PTSD. So people have to be very aware that if they're trying to treat some of their trauma, and they also know that they suffer from things like bipolar or have a family history, that there is not clear research with that group. And it's a big discussion. I know that Ben Sessa, who was here on Thursday night, has talked a lot about, well, maybe we need to figure out how to look at that population as well in a safe manner, psycholytic instead of psychedelic. But for those who are, looking at the research now going, oh, let me tell my mom I should take psilocybin because it's going to help me, I have depression, be aware if you're also suffering from bipolar that you are not necessarily the target for who the therapy has shown success.
Psychedelics are shortcuts. Most of the things that you can do with psychedelics, you can do with breath work or other internal work, right?
Yeah, agreed. I did about 7 years of holotropic breath work before I ever touched any psychedelic compounds.
The one other thing too is to keep in mind that these are all supposed to be done in conjunction with therapy. And so without therapy or without integration, you're likely not to have the success either.
You're just partying.
Yeah. It's just, yeah.
You're just partying.
Which isn't bad.
We're adults. I mean,
It's energy,
I
right?
tell people that you're allowed to go home and rip bongs if you want.
Yeah.
But like, I medicate myself all day. I mean, I use cannabis all day, but I use it, and and it keeps me going all day.
You know, if you look at the really famous article from 3 years ago in the New England Journal of Medicine that said escitalopram and psilocybin create the same result of lowering depression, there was no real difference. They both had therapy involved, right? That was the difference. So talking to somebody, I think if anybody here is struggling with things, talk to people. That's the first place to go.
Right, community is medicine for a lot of this. Yeah, it's not really about just, oh yeah, take this pill, you're good to go, or like do a little bit of therapy, you're good to go, and it's a lot more complex than that. So
I wish it was magic, though.
that'd be cool. Yeah, maybe someday. ChatGPT will fix it, right?
If you can get it to work.
I can never get
Loading.
on. So now there's a larger problem, like are psychedelics for everybody? One of the elephants in the room right now is how much this is going to cost when this becomes clinically available. LSD street price anywhere 50 cents to like $10 a go. MAPS MDMA protocol, we're estimating anywhere from like $10,000 to $20,000. And we don't really know what this is going to look like once it's in clinical practice, and can really sick people actually afford this? Have you all thought about like the access implications, and how do we scale this properly to help get these people back to their families and their lives?
Yeah, that's the issue. I feel like is how much it costs to go to a clinical, like to a ketamine treatment center, and if you need 5 treatments or whatever to get yourself right, maybe that veteran. I'm just thinking veteran-wise. I'm sorry that that's what my focus is, but that's what my focus is.
No, please keep it going. They need it.
So if they can't afford it, then the access isn't there. That doesn't count as access in my mind.
Yeah.
I think access includes free access, right? But then I think that access is also, you have to include like who pays for it, and then part of the access is who owns the patent. So if I own the patent and I do not want a generic created, you don't have to let generics be created. So there are companies out there that are playing ball with everybody, and there's definitely companies out there that are in it for themselves. I'm not going to name drop them or shit on them here, but you can find out that information yourself or talk to me off stage. But it's definitely something that access, there is a right to access. There is money that always is going to be made, and that money can pay for other people's access.
Agreed. And again, reiterating, LSD anywhere from 50 cents to $10. For about $50, you could probably grow mushrooms for the rest of your life and not put in any more money. And biotech and pharma is going to have a really hard time understanding what to do with this, and it's going to be really interesting. Kind of like when MedMen was trying to ban home grows in California or something, right? So that's an exciting concept.
There's been work recently to kind of address, the gold standard for therapy now is to have 2 therapists in the room that hold each other accountable, male, female, to reduce, sexual tension or any kind of power dynamic. But there has been some work done on creating sort of a more group-style therapy to consider the costs. We have to. We live in a capitalist world, and that's an issue. Because that's an issue. We see it with ketamine right now, that it's not insured, and so who's going to ketamine clinics for depression? Rich white people. And it's not really reaching to the underrepresented populations, and we should figure out how to make that more accessible.
It should be accessible through nonprofits.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about religious organizations being able to take the helm. I engaged in a really subversive project about a year or 2 ago, getting a lot of Episcopal priests together to actually kind of get them educated on the topic and how they might be able to impact their communities. And it got to the point where they actually wanted to start growing mushrooms and giving them away to their congregations.
As long as it's in their beliefs.
That's awesome.
Right. And you know what's cool is they were already actually on track to be growing cannabis and giving it away to sick people for free. It was incredible to see. So I think when we're doing state legalization initiatives, we should be pushing for religious inclusion and community inclusion. Colorado still has an opportunity that Oregon kind of missed, so I'm really hopeful for that. I want to start taking some questions. We got about 10 minutes left. Who would like to jump in? Any questions out there? If not, just like Dennis, we can keep tap dancing. You, sir.
Can I throw you the mic so everybody can hear you?
Agreed. Yeah, we do need to be taking an integrative medicine approach here. And Dr. Andy Weil, who did a lot of the establishment of the beachhead of integrative medicine, is very pro psychedelics. And I'm actually going to think, I've heard rumblings that inside very large healthcare organizations, they are looking in this direction. So thank you for that. And agreed. Yeah, mind, body, spirit for sure. It's one unified thing.
We're bringing it to the university, Elizabeth, I promise. We are.
And Elizabeth, there's a really great organization you should check out outside of British Columbia, or I think it's called Roots to Thrive, and they're on Vancouver Island doing cohort-based ketamine-assisted psychotherapy for healthcare workers to help slow the attrition of healthcare workers outside of that scene. Because obviously we need more therapists, doctors, nurses, et cetera, to keep us all well. And if everybody's quitting because the system's horrible to work in, what are we doing? You know, I know friends that are healthcare workers that'll say, I can't smoke weed again, so booze and acid it is, because that doesn't show up on the healthcare or the drug screens, right?
You know, one of my roles at FIU is the director of our pre-health office, so I see a lot of our pre-meds and pre-dents, and I am seeing a higher percentage of people interested in psychiatry because they're now seeing these new modalities that, for many years being a psychiatrist meant just using the existing medications, whether they be SSRIs or NDRIs or whatever, reuptake inhibitors were out there. But there's hope now, and I think we're going to start seeing more of the medical schools with psychiatry programs, and we're seeing them pop up. I'm seeing it in Emory, in Texas, not just in Hopkins and Yale, but all over now. Yeah.
Next question. A little louder, please.
Think about microbiome in the stomach and people being
So my role is really as an educator, not a researcher, but you bring up a really good point. Serotonin receptors exist in the gut too. And so early on when I was talking about the binding potential, there are some people who, you'll see lower expression or less potential for binding. And that is something that's worth looking at, especially since serotonin is so involved in digestive stuff as well. Yeah.
There's actually something called the brain-gut axis that if you could disrupt it when you're a baby, you have an IQ under 70. You typically die. It's what's called necrotizing enteritis, if anybody wants to look it up, NEC. And so the brain-gut axis is very, very important. Things like antibiotics, Tylenol, things like that, fuck shit up. And so keeping your entire biome is important. And then you also have, I think, more neural network in your stomach, I believe, than in your brain, as well as you have a field in your heart as well. And the three of them together have been thought to affect things more than we think. So things like probiotics now becoming important are stemming, I think, from the fact that we're now learning more about the brain. They just found a prehistoric, I think, 500 million year old brain that's the oldest brain that they've ever found in a fish, and it's two different pieces. I think that surprised a lot of scientists, and I think that'll be telling how our brains developed and that this is part of our brain, but it's not the whole thing.
As far as I know, there's an unpublished study underway looking at gut health with psychedelics, and stay tuned. It's going to be a big topic, so you're onto something there. I'm very excited for that field to really develop and grow out. Next question.
If you guys want to come up, I can give you guys a microphone. Yeah, right? We can share. If you guys like the questions, it's super easy. It's so hard to hear the questions otherwise.
And just like Dr. Carl Hart says, let's do questions and not long soliloquies designed as questions. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I got a question about serotonin syndrome. Have you ever been in trouble with that with some patients or something?
Serotonin syndrome is something else. Does anybody have anything to say about serotonin syndrome? If not, I will. Cool, I gotcha. So serotonin syndrome is a really scary thing. The scariest thing to me about serotonin syndrome is actually if people go deep into the Amazon jungle on all sorts of pharmaceuticals, particularly high levels of SSRIs, and are very far away from a hospital and consume ayahuasca, they could theoretically and sometimes do have really aggressive serotonin syndrome situations, and there's no hope to get medical treatment. And this is a really scary thing to me. So it's something around the MAOIs and the serotonin really, just making your brain not want to fly anymore. But we do need to be talking about serotonin syndrome more. Are you seeing it in your practice at all? Right. So relatively low frequency, but it can happen. So it's mostly around drug interactions, and I'll admit to being a drug abuser, and back like 5 years ago, I was consuming far too much MDMA regularly, and I felt bad once in a while, but I never had that, and I would eat like an amount I won't even say on stage. It was cool for a little bit, but it was kind of horrible too. I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore. But any other questions? Yeah, right here.
Have you tried ketamine versus compound ketamine? And what's the difference? Maybe you haven't tried it, but what is the difference? Or do you know the different? Yeah, have you heard of compound ketamine?
So, do you mean like using racemic mixture, using RNS versus using S-ketamine?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm actually a professor at FIU as well. So I do research. So I've been researching in College of Business. So I've been doing research on ketamine because I'm looking into a ketamine clinic, and so I'm finding that there's S-ketamine, but they're cracking down on it a lot just because it's, I guess, too many clinics there's abuse, there's other stuff happening with it. So as a substitute, there's compound ketamine, which means they're mixing it with something else. So the S-ketamine is off-label, and then the compound is like just that you've mixed it with saline or something of that nature. But if you
I don't know, but I do know there's a lot of ketamine clinics that are here that can talk to you, and some of them are actually sitting in the audience that can talk to you a little bit more about what's going on at the clinic level. Chemistry-wise, there's stereoisomers of ketamine that are called the R and the S isomer. You can either use the racemic mixture, often done intravenous, or you can use the S-ketamine, which is usually done with the nasal spray. They have different pharmacokinetics, absorption and all. But I would probably, I'm not an expert in this, I would encourage you to talk to some of the ketamine people here. I'll send you to them, they're right over there.
Are you guys want to answer my question about the booth? I'm saying when we talk.
Yeah, why don't you guys check?
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
My other question was mushroom. You mentioned that it was five. Yeah, you mentioned about growing mushrooms. You can grow them for $5 to $10.
Yeah.
$50 for a lifetime. Okay.
They're rigid.
So
Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I've never tried mushrooms, never seen them, I don't think.
Come stop by our booth.
So I just want you to expand more on that. Where do you get this? Where,
Well, this is actually a really fascinating place to be in the world right now, in this building.
Spores aren't illegal.
You could probably buy not probably, you can absolutely buy everything you need to be growing for a very long period of time. Spores, you can buy in most states legally for a pretty affordable rate. There are states where it is illegal to purchase spores. And then assorted grow kit supplies like sterilized bags of grain or various mixtures. You would put those spores in there and it would grow, and with a very low likelihood of failure. And it's a really obvious situation when they do fail. I used to grow, I can't grow anymore because I have people watching me probably. So it was a really fun project for a while though. I probably grew more gourmet than psychedelic mushrooms, but it's a great hobby. If you wanted to do cheap experiments at home with cardboard, you would get some cardboard wet, a little bit of hydrogen peroxide on there to kind of clean it off a little bit, do some slices of oyster mushroom, and you can actually see the mycelium grow all over the cardboard. So yeah, check out some YouTube videos on that, but if you stop by our booth later, directly across from us are some people, the Psychedelics Today booth, are some people with all the supplies. I was actually blown away when I saw what they had on offer because it's what I wish I had when I was getting into it instead of having to scour the internet in strange ways.
It's like the IKEA for growing mushrooms or something.
It's lovely.
Yeah, Google it, right? There is something just that popped in my mind when we're talking about who is it right for and things like that. If you're allergic to, say, like coconut or nuts, the substrate that you grow the mushrooms in, you'll actually find that the mushrooms have the same effect, even though there's no coconut necessarily in it.
Yeah.
And so when you are growing things, make sure it's sterile, things like that. Everybody can grow things, like weed grows in your backyard, right? Things
Before
like
they kick us off the stage, I just want to say, please consider supporting Grateful Veteran. And for those that are also interested, I'm going to make a shameless plug here. I'm actually teaming up with Ron and the Balanced Veterans Network and running a 200-mile race across the Outer Banks in February. That's 200 miles straight. And all the donations, I'm fundraising for BVN, so if you look me up on LinkedIn, there's an explanation of what Balanced Veterans Network does, and consider supporting these organizations. Thanks, guys.
All right, well, thank you all for being here and coming to our panel. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Yeah, give me one of those cool noises. Bum, 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 bum. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, great one.
Hey guys, can we grab a quick photo?
Grab a photo, and the next panel, what's up, Mike? Hi. The next panel that's coming up is about what legislative lessons can psychedelics learn from cannabis? We got lawyers in the house. You know, they say, everybody hates lawyers until you need one. Can I get an amen? Right. So we've got some legal expertise. They're going to bill you after, so don't worry about it. You have a phone call with a friend's dad or something, say what's up, get invited to the barbecue, and then you get a bill. It's happened a few times. So here we go. Let's go ahead. What legislative lessons can psychedelics learn from cannabis? All right. Hi. I'm good. They might need an extra person, and I think maybe you have expertise. Yeah. Tap in with him. Do you need another person, or are you doing okay? Okay, so you're on. Yeah, if you're into it. All right, let's rock and roll. I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over right now. I'm going to go back and take another power nap because I deserve one. All right, take care, everybody. Yeah, I think we got all the mics dialed in. Cool.
Go ahead.
Check, 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 check. Beautiful. Great. We're just waiting for one more panelist to come back. Lucas is using the restroom. I guess I'll sit on this end, and we have space for one.
Good. Always good to chat.
Thanks everyone for staying here all day and waiting for this panel. Got a lot of legal expertise here, so super excited to speak with you.
Check, check. So the panel we're about to start is what legal lessons can the psychedelic industry learn from the cannabis industry? Lucas will be right back. I guess we can get started. I'll do a brief intro and we'll let everybody introduce themselves. And if we need to, take your time on the end there, Michael, until Lucas gets back. But anyways, my name is Dr. Jonathan Fields. My doctorate and my master's is actually in and herbal medicine. And we'll go from there. I'll give you some more information as we go.
Hi, my name is Masha T, and I work with ACS Laboratory. I've been in the cannabis industry for about 5 years. We test most of the cannabis in Florida for potency, terpenes, and then the bad stuff, pesticides, heavy metals, and all that. And we just developed a method to test psilocybin because we are a DEA registered laboratory, so we can legally receive mushrooms and test those for 7 different tryptamines, which I'll go into later.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Murray Powell Esquire. I'm a cannabis, agricultural, dietary supplement, trade, and psychedelics attorney. I've been practicing cannabis law for 7 years, and then psychedelics probably closer to about 4 years. I also run the Justice Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization based in New York City. And what we do there is we help legacy operators get into the legal cannabis space. There is a long-term plan for supporting legacy in the psychedelics industry as well. So we have an expanded footprint plan for cannabis, and then once I go through a few cycles where it's business as usual, we're going to incorporate our psychedelics legacy community. You know, our hashtag is legacy to leadership, and making sure that as we're developing these industries on top of the existing industries, which are the legacy people who've been building the infrastructure, that we don't leave them behind. So really excited about speaking with you today.
My name's Michael Minardi. I'm an attorney in Florida. I'm excited to be here. Love this space, love the awareness and education that's happening, and hopefully going to be able to help change the laws here in the state of Florida soon. I've run for office last time. I'm going to do it again. We need someone in the legislature that can educate them and, you know, be a voice for the people and understands the plant and this fungi very well. So appreciate it.
My name is Lucas Gerler. I am the president of a newly formed PAC. I think that's why I'm up here specifically. I'm also the CEO of Liquid Gold Consulting and the COO of Panacea Plant Sciences, amongst some other shit that we won't get into right now. I'm really excited to share the stage with all of you.
Same.
We've never had the chance to share the stage. We've been friends for a while. Love everything that you do. Same. So it's great to be here again.
Fantastic. Mike, I'm going to vote for you just based on the shoes alone. Love them. Beautiful. So I didn't give you guys too much background on myself, but I am actually one of the doctors. I just signed a retainer with a couple attorneys out of New Jersey that are part of the State Bar Psychedelic Association to be represented as one of the doctors and my practice in the 9th District Court for the Ames appeal, the 3rd appeal. So I wanted to see if, thank you, I wrote a whole letter for the DA, explained to them why we need this kind of stuff, and if we have time, maybe I'll share some of that, or if anybody's interested, I'll share my points of view on why it's important medically and clinically. I think a lot of you all know, but they turned down the last couple appeals, right? And they refused to even hear it. So now there's a bunch more firms that have taken up on this, and there's a bunch more doctors that are involved that are putting their information in there. And I was just wondering, are Are you all familiar with it, and are any of you all involved with any of that that's going on with the Ames 3 appeal specifically?
I'll say that I'm not involved. My areas of focus are really about legacy to legal or legacy to leadership. So really looking at indigenous community, IP protecting, working with IP attorneys. I don't practice IP, but the language that they've had, the cultural protections. Again, cannabis and psychedelics have both been used for thousands of years. So when we're using language like, Irie in cannabis, or if we're using shaman in the psychedelic space, really recognizing the root of those words and allowing the individuals that own that experience culturally to benefit and continue to participate. And then there's some access issues that I get involved in. In the last panel you guys spoke about, affordable access, which is really important as we regulate, making sure that we don't over-regulate to the point that it's regulated to make it easier or lock it down for people with means and wealth. And I'm on the ASTM D37 committee on cannabis, their executive committee, because I lead the diversity, equity, inclusion subcommittee. So that's traditionally my area of focus, and then there's an interest in the research aspects of it.
Not involved in that case, definitely would like to see and love to see where it goes. It does kind of remind me of sort of the 80s and the cannabis program that they had for people that, somewhere if we can start that, I'd love to see more people and more doctors stand up and apply for their patients for it, because the more people that they get and the more people that, the more noise it makes, I think the better. It's something that we do and continue to fight for cannabis. We don't see a lot of criminal charges for mushrooms and psychedelics, but it is definitely something that we would challenge, and so that's a Schedule I substance case, right? So in that case, if you don't know, my understanding, so there's a Right to Try Act, right? It's in Florida and federally, and so if a substance has passed, is it Schedule I clearance, which is the first phase, which is basically safety and efficacy, right, of the substance, so they know it's safe, then you are allowed to be able to, for a terminally ill patient, request access for that medicine to that patient. And the DEA or the feds have denied this patient, who's a terminally ill cancer patient, access, to this medication, which it's been fast-tracked by the FDA. It's passed, my understanding, Schedule II, and they're in Schedule III trials right now on it. So give it up, man. Just stop controlling people. And so so the Schedule I aspect of it, right, is it means it's highly addictive, has no medical use in the U.S. Like cannabis is still a Schedule I substance. So these are things that we're challenging as a law firm constantly and regularly. And it is something that we would definitely challenge and love to any doctors who have patients who comply or fit. We'd happy to help you out through that process and start making the noise about it and getting people to trust this. There's reputable studies, that it should be FDA approved, that show the benefits for terminally ill patients for using this. And if people have, used it sufficiently and enough, you have your ego death, you understand, we're just going to move on. We'll all live, but we're just going to move on. Our energy will pass on, so.
Dr. Sunil is actually on our advisory board. Last year, we also, when I say we, David, our CEO of Panacea, really should be up here instead of me. He's just in Seattle right now. He is the one that himself started the lawsuit against the DA last year when they were trying to schedule 5 other tryptamines the first time, a retaliatory effort from some other freedom of information requests that we were doing against them. The DEA, if you don't know it, is a self-serving bastard that the only thing that they do is criminalize things so they can take over property and assets, right? They don't know what the fuck they're doing. We got the person that was in charge of the lawsuit fired, basically, or moved over. But anything when it comes down to that, there's a lot of political bullshit that goes on behind closed doors. And so what may make common sense isn't what actually gets done. And even making noise, things like that, isn't always enough. Sometimes it has to come down to things like challenges or things like comments. And so there was a point when they asked for comments, the DA last year. Well, if you went to their website, you couldn't actually comment. And then so we said, hey, well, guys, you can't comment, so how can we make a comment on this? But people being in the know and going on the DA's website, going on .gov websites, things like that, looking at things that are happening when they're trying to hide these things and force them through, they had never had comments. So if everybody here makes a comment, and if there's this doctor or this Harvard doctor that has 10,000 patients that have gone through this treatment make a comment, they take that very seriously. And then in the responses, you actually see the challenges that we've made. That's what these statements are for why they're not scheduling them or are scheduling them. And so it is very important. I think that these things, we really have to understand that everything that happens and is legal, and you can have an effect on it. It doesn't just happen in this space, you can affect it.
Great points. And for me, I have parents bringing in suicidal teenagers. I'm contracted with the VA, so I work with a lot of veterans with chronic pain, PTSD. We have seniors that are going through cancer treatments or need palliative care. And I think it's unethical and immoral to deny people these treatments at this point, and to deny the medicinal value. It's crazy that we're still at Schedule 1. So I think it's great that everybody's here and everybody's interested, and please write to your congressmen and your senators and get involved with some of the people here to see how we can help, how we can add in your comments, share your stories, right? It's going to take all of us to stand up and put an end to this. We're not going to do it any one person, any one firm, or any one speaker.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think it is unconscionable to deny people access to things that will help them. I have a new client, possibly pro bono at this point, but a new client in New York where they are exploring, from a research perspective, but just a social impact perspective, giving people access to psychedelics, to psilocybins, who have already experienced trauma. So these are individuals that struggle to operate in our world. And trying to, I don't want to use remediate, but giving them access to psychedelics so that they can be repaired, and then through their program, placing them where they become counselors themselves to help people who are currently experiencing trauma. So just like they say, hurt people hurt people, they're reversing that by healing people and using healed people to heal other people. And I think I'm really excited about that from a research perspective, from a social impact perspective, and just from a greater good perspective and individual healing. So there is a responsibility to ensure that people have access. That's what we fight for, as attorneys, because we understand the legal lingo and the legislative process in a way that other people may not, or some other people may not. I think we do have that responsibility to be the tip of the spear and lead that effort and make sure that we're available to protect people as they're soldiering in this journey, because there are people, just like in the cannabis industry, the legacy people I represent, the reason why I do all this work for free is because they took the risk. Some people lost custody of their children. Some people lost their jobs. Some people lost their families. Some people had to endure robberies as a part of being part of this legacy industry. It's not different with the psychedelic space. So that's why we feel the responsibility to support the community and get to them to the point where it is legal, so they don't have to look over their shoulders. And with that legalization, that they can also benefit from the economical opportunity, and they don't see people who weren't there in the trenches benefiting from this natural medicine. You know, when you're looking at comparing, because I think that's part of our topic today, and comparing the cannabis journey with the psychedelics journey, we do see, I feel like the therapeutic community has embraced psychedelics in a way they never embraced cannabis, and we're still struggling. And I think it's that addiction narrative that was forced on us about cannabis. It's less so with psychedelics. They don't really talk about psychedelics and addiction the same way they talk about cannabis as a gateway drug and tied to addiction. So that's a benefit for the psychedelics community, because you don't have to overcome that addiction narrative in the same way. But I'm really happy to see the research that's being done, the way the therapeutic community is present at these conferences. We don't really see a lot of therapists in the cannabis conferences, but in psychedelics,
There's a bunch here.
There's a bunch here, and I applaud them for leading industry and being present. So I think that's something that'll accelerate the legalization of psychedelics in a way that we haven't seen with cannabis. You did a great job of mentioning like the veteran experience, and in cannabis we also have that veteran experience, and we have to thank our veterans for the legalization that we're seeing currently. And we have those same stories in cannabis and psychedelics. What we won't see in psychedelics are the sick children stories that we have in cannabis. So there's trade-offs. So yay, we have the therapy community on side, but you know, cannabis as medicine for children will definitely always be more acceptable than psychedelics as medicine for children, I feel. So I'm just doing a little bit of comparison here.
Great points. I'm going to go down the line now. So specifically to the topic, Masha, what specific legal lessons do you think the psychedelic industry can learn from the cannabis industry? Or from your point of view, what mistakes did the cannabis industry make that we should be avoiding right now from a legal standpoint?
Well, I can speak to lab testing. So the way that I would explain it for those who are familiar with cannabis, so there's THC, which is just one cannabinoid of over 118. And we test for 23 cannabinoids, so THC, CBD, CBG, CBV, THCV, et cetera, et cetera. So, and terpenes and flavonoids, and there's so many components of the plant, but yet everyone's still hooked on THC and measuring the THC content. Well, it's also very important to measure the psilocybin content of mushrooms, not just psilocybin. There's psilocybin, psilocin, biocystin, norbiocystin, ergonicin, 4-HTMT. There are so many tryptamines. We test for 7 of those tryptamines, and there's over 400 alkaloids in mushrooms. So we know very little. But what we do know is that it is possible to test for potency right now. And a lot of these studies, and even Johns Hopkins and some of these universities, they never talk about the potency of what they're taking. It's always the amount. Well, how much did you take? Well, half a gram. Well, half a gram of what? And how much is that? And what we've seen in the data, different mushrooms, so golden teachers have a different potency than penis envy, that have a different potency than B+, that have and the different tryptamines. So some have more psilocybin, some have more psilocin, some have more biocystin. So what I'm saying is that you can't have an industry unless you have a way to measure the potency and then test it for purity and all of that. Now, bringing it back, with cannabis, everybody complains that lab testing is so inconsistent. And why is that? It's because these laboratories, so third-party laboratories, they develop their own methods. They develop their own methods, and then it's kind of like an IP for how they're testing something. And every lab has a different method. Because they're using the same reference standards, theoretically, they should all come to the same result. But it doesn't always happen because there's variables in
So we don't have standards.
Right, thank you. We don't have standards. There are no standards. And I look at labs for the same strain for strains grown in Nevada versus strains grown in Florida. And the reason the THC is different is because the moisture content of the sample is different. Now, that's really getting into the detail, but that's important. That's how the products are measured, and unfortunately, when you look at legislation, and so even for hemp, right, they're looking at it's got to be less than 0.3% THC in a whole hemp plant. Well, guess what that happens? Then a whole other market opens up for THCA and Delta-8 and synthetics and all of these other things because it's almost like an unnatural way to regulate the market and force it to cheat itself. So standards are important. What would be really, really powerful is if the labs could get together and all determine one testing standard for some of these catalysts. And then at least you have a baseline and somewhere to start. And then as far as the FDA, so the FDA has refused to review CBD as a supplement in food, and they've kind of kicked it back, kicked it back to the DEA. Why? They say because they're not sure of its safety. Well, I'm going to tell you, the way that we test CBD for 67 residual solvents and 21 heavy metals and I mean all kinds of impurities. If I tested a box of Cheerios or a bag of rice, it wouldn't pass.
You don't need to test it. We know what's in there.
Right. So so the standards that we hold for, even CBD products and legal hemp products are they are so much higher than anything that we eat, that we put in our mouth today. So standards, that's the main thing is standards, yeah.
And that's such a great point as far as like testing food overall. Nothing would pass, and it's so unfortunate. And then again, when you look at legacy in the indigenous community, like I've had for the Justice Foundation on our board, we have Umi, who's one of the people from Dead Prez. It's a hip hop group, and he does a lot of speaking for us and for himself. He's a great strong advocate, and he said in legacy we tested the product on ourselves. I wouldn't give anyone something that I wouldn't consume. So we tested our products, but we're open to products. Legacy industry has always been open to testing. I think sometimes as we move towards standardization, we forget to, one, have that cultural lens on developing standards and an affordability lens on developing standards. Is it necessary for public safety? And that's why the work that I do at ASTM is so important, is because someone has to be the gatekeeper or the champion to step in and say, yeah, I know we have the capability to test all these things, but is it necessary for public safety? So that's a very good point. But yeah, we have to really take into consideration that not everything, when you're talking about standards, when you're talking about purity, it really is about keeping people safe and not making it so rigorous that we are intentionally or unintentionally excluding the participants in the industry that have always been there. I think there's plenty of opportunity for education, but we approach things from a North American perspective all the time, and we have to think that cannabis and psychedelics, this is a global plant that's been around for thousands of years. So whatever we develop as a standard should be available and accessible to someone in Mali, someone in Peru who wants to be a producer. And we need to make sure that from a global perspective, we're not excluding the people who actually gave us the insight to even want to develop a commercialized market around these natural, whether you say God, Jah, Allah, given medicine. And we have to make sure that, one, it's medicine and healing. It has roots in indigenous culture. It needs to be accessible for all from a production standpoint as well as from a consumption standpoint.
So back to the question regarding how many people have like $2 to $35 million to get in the cannabis industry in Florida? No?
That guy.
One? Does anyone want to get into the psychedelic industry? Okay. So right there, fundamentally, I think we've learned a lot from the cannabis industry if we want to have a business for everybody that we really have to learn and try to get ahead of. How that happens, we saw how this cannabis industry was formed in the state of Florida, right? I don't know if many people know, but it was basically contributions to legislators back in 2013 and 2014 as they saw medical marijuana, for at least low THC marijuana, was going to be on the ballot. Medical marijuana was going to be on the ballot for the first time in 2014. These groups got together, they passed a law to extremely limit the amount of entities that could get a low THC bill, right? This was the Charlotte's Web, 0.8% THC or less, and they created that law. And then what did they do? They then funded those same politicians in order to make sure that they were the first ones and the only ones currently to this day to have licenses in the state of Florida and then being able to sell to all the patients under Amendment 2. So when I see this and when I look at this, if you all don't think that that's the same exact type of situation that we're going to potentially see in Florida, I got some land in the middle of the ocean to sell you. Because it's what's going to happen, and we have to get ahead of this now. I really think so, and I'm a believer of the church model. I'm a believer of being able to open it up so it's not honestly all clinical. Talk to an indigenous person who's been doing it for thousands of years, and their family and their history has been doing it forever. They're going to be like, I want to send my ayahuasca to get a lab to get it tested before I, serve it to people. Yeah, I don't think so. And we have to trust in these things. And, the biggest problem I think we have, and I know they talked about on the last panel, is this fentanyl allegedly being in everything right now, right? And that's the big fear the government is pushing. I haven't seen it tested in cannabis anywhere in any cases or anything like that. So the source you get it through, but we really have to learn through legalization of cannabis to try to get ahead of this, to push it, to get that grass movement coming. There's 3 ways to get it done. Through the courts, right? And we're absolutely willing to continue to fight through the courts. So 1, challenging the Schedule I substance of it. 2, through medical necessity issues. If you do get arrested for psychedelics, you have mushrooms on you in Florida, I don't care what it is for psychedelics, just for 1, shut the hell up. Don't talk to the cops. But if you're going to say anything, tell them you use it for medicinal reasons. Give me some ability to defend you and kind of change the laws. And we did this with cannabis, right? I was one of the only attorneys in the country to win medical marijuana cases where people were cultivating cannabis, and we got it off for saying that they had a medical necessity for it. They didn't have reasonable alternatives, and that this was the best substance for it. The big difference between cannabis and psychedelics is that we have studies on psychedelics from the 70s. Right? If you're not aware of it, go back and research it. Do look some research of the MIT studies on psychedelics and LSD, and what it did for those students. And there was nothing negative or bad. Even when you look up studies on bad trips of people, the majority of them feel as if they got some beneficial experience out of it at a later period of time. So the studies on psychedelics realized this was something that was being widely studied by psychologists in the 70s, and then it got shut down by who? FDA and really drug companies, right? It's when the serotonin drugs started coming out and things like that. So these are the things that we have to continue to fight against. And we're talking, I'm just going to go to the CBD issue real quick. Right, CBD and hemp, the efficacy isn't there, the safety isn't there. But CBD and Epidiolex, which is obviously a scheduled substance approved by the FDA, is there for safety. So the fact that they don't correlate those two just because it's a plant, I think is absolutely ridiculous. Epidiolex is actually fundamentally derived from the plant. It's not a straight up synthetic CBD or THC like Marinol is, right? Marinol is an FDA approved substance, which is THC. So how are these things, when we talk about the plant, not approved? And it's not. It's bullshit, it's money, and it's corruption that has permeated our medical system, that has permeated our society, that we really have to do everything we can to take back.
I'm not following that shit up.
Say something. Anything.
I would just add some things. I would say that we can't expect that a solution exists and that somebody else is going to find it, propose it, come up with it. When I go to DC, that's the issue that they have, is they don't have the solution. They're asking you for it. And so I think that the biggest mistake that we made was, A, leaving it to the states, not truly pushing for federal reform from the beginning for cannabis, and allowing the states to continue to legalize things, because with that does not come everything that comes with federal protection. That allowed them for years to play this fucking game where they would be like, it's cool, we're not gonna come raid your shit. And then like the next week they would come and raid your shit. And so I think the lesson is like, well, these kind of things can happen to us now. I don't know how many people here are technically violating federal laws right now, felonies, right? We're all felons, right? And so it's, to create those protections, it is something that we have to do a three-pronged approach. It will not just be legal, it won't just be cases, it will have to be something that there's going to have to be hard fucking money given to politicians to make the laws. I can't stress that enough.
It's the only way, and Michael Franti has a song that says, the way to get the votes in Congress, you gotta make it rain. And that's what it's all about, and that's why we're at where we're at. I think under any circumstance, you look at any issue in this country, is legislated, and it's legislated by the people that have the money, that exactly that. When we go up to Tallahassee, the past, X amount of years fighting for cannabis, they didn't have bills. It's like we wrote the legislation and said, hey, this is what we want. This is what we'd like to see. We propose it to you. We make it easy. Here's the research and studies that show that, allowing cannabis to be treated the same as opiates and other drugs in the workplace, isn't going to make everybody stupid and not be able to work and everybody injure themselves at work. Because that's what they think, right? And we do employment law cases, so we're fighting that for patients right now. The patients should be treated the same in Florida. So you have to present that, all of them, the information, the research with it, in order to go up there. Because honestly, legislators are just people. A majority of them are not attorneys. They're people that believe in the system or want to change it for whatever reason. And, just like law enforcement and people they don't necessarily have the time to do the work or don't want to do the work. So the more you can feed them and spoon feed them and give them a reason, and we're working on starting the Tampa Regional Psychedelic Society, but our focus is going to be veterans, because veterans are, I think the forefront of this, and trauma patients, to be able to put this understanding and the not psychedelics, the anti-pharmaceutical products that are actually causing people to be more suicidal. So, and the drug addiction, because those are the big problems and big hot topics that we have to stop, and this can stop it.
Great. So my follow-up on that, and I'm going to ask everybody for their personal opinion and spin on it. And I love about the social justice and the affordability is a big problem, right? I have patients coming in now and they're seeing I'm posting about stuff, they're reading all these articles about psychedelics in the media and all the health benefits and the mental health stuff, and patients are coming in begging for it. And since I hold a medical license, I can't refer you, I can't prescribe you, and we send people to, for ketamine every once in a while, but that's not for everybody. It's expensive. Insurance isn't covering it. And me personally, I've heard some wonderful stories from ketamine, right, and the work that it's doing for people. But me personally, I'm not having any pharmaceutical put into my arm. I'm just not doing it, right? I'd rather sit in ceremony. That's my personal opinion. And when it comes to the medicalization or the legalization, I'm for legalization. I don't need to be the middleman, right? If patients are always going to come and they're going to want an expert's advice. But if you can't afford it and you need to grow it at home, I'm all for that. So what are your personal opinions on the medicalization versus legalization, and which do you think we'll have first?
Well, I think that it's pretty clear in Florida that legalization is going to be on the ballot. I mean, we follow the money, right? So we know that it's probably going to happen. I don't think home grow is part of that initiative. So, but some progress is better than none. So I think that we'll probably have legalization first. But people are always, they're going to grow their own if they have a desire. It's like you grow your own vegetables. You can grow your own mushrooms. Cannabis, it takes time, but if you have the love for it.
Veggies are legal.
Right. I mean, so I think.
For now.
who's going to tell you what you can or cannot do in your house? But it is a risk, you know. So, but I do see that within the next year or so, or 2 years, that we'll see legalization on the ballot, and it'll pass adult use faster than home grow for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think legalization is imminent. The conversation earlier about fentanyl, I'm so sorry. Sometimes I answer the question I want to answer instead of answering the question you gave me. But going back to the fentanyl conversation, for me, it brings up the point of chain of custody. And chain of custody is really important for like international registrations and safety, consumer safety. But when you're approaching legalization and the possible frameworks, one, we have to observe the global environment and the different ways to play. So with my work, as Rastafari, with my work with Rastafari and looking at sacramental use of ganja, right? How do we approach it? And I think I'm sharing this because I think the psychedelics journey is very, very similar. So, there are 4 approaches that I've been developing strategies for. And the first one is really, looking at the Jamaican model where you have the first modern sovereign state to legalize sacramental use of cannabis. And then Antigua follows quickly after, and there's opportunity for a domino effect. St. Vincent played around with it and backtracked, but that's where they created their legal framework through a cannabis licensing authority, and then outside of that, through the Ministry of Justice, that's where sacramentals held. So it's really looked at as clearly distinct from the commercial market. It's the same genus and species, same plant, but for sacramental, it's treated completely different. It even has a different government agency responsible for authority. So that's one approach when we're looking at it from a sacramental traditional standpoint. The other 3 approaches are within the legal framework and not giving separate authority. And it's looking at, as we're moving home grow forward, saying that now we've gotten to the point that we trust, and we're seeing, again, we have, Colorado, we have all these states in the West, and then we're starting to see home grow in the Northeast corridor of the country, and internationally. But now when we're looking at home grow, there is an opportunity to say, hey, wait a second, we're saying this is important for patients, but let's not forget spiritual protections and the United Nations protections. As you're legalizing home grow, make sure home grow provisions have an exception for houses of worship that utilize, I say cannabis, but also psychedelics spiritually, sacramentally, and ceremonially, and making sure that we're not violating people's human rights. So that's another way to approach the legal framework is, yes, we can piggyback on home grow provisions and just add extra language around houses of worship having home grow provisions. Again, protecting that chain of custody and mitigating the fentanyl risk because they're growing their own. And then another approach for that is looking at when you micro licenses. So that's like not new, but more popular now, especially in the Northeast corridor. We're seeing micro licenses being issued for cannabis. So those are basically a small vertical license for a cannabis producer. Same can happen for psychedelics, so that you can protect that chain of custody because you're actually cultivating, processing, and retailing or sacramentally distributing yourself. So you maintain that chain of custody. It mitigates the risk of fentanyl contamination and other contamination, and it's within that legal structure of you already have a micro-license structure. We're just going to make sure micro-licenses are available and prioritized for these houses of worship that utilize the plant sacramentally or ceremonially. And then the final is, we're not seeing any give in those other areas. So we're going to work in your legal structure, but we're going to make sure that our community, our membership community, our church community has individuals that will apply for cultivation, this guy, apply for processing, this guy, apply for delivery, this guy, within our membership in our community, apply for retail, this guy, and then join those licenses through relationship together to create a pseudo vertical so that we can make sure that it passes our standards as Rastafari, as indigenous community, for what would be acceptable for Sacramento without the chemicals, without the contamination, and we're building our own vertical. So those are like the 4 strategies that I have been having discussions around, socializing, depending on the market, in order to mirror some of the designs we've seen globally in cannabis, for cannabis as well as psychedelics from a spiritual, sacramental, purity perspective.
So I run a nonprofit as well, that we do health and wellness retreats and stuff like that. So, I think we always need organizations like that, and, people in business should always take a percentage of what they make and try to give it back in one way or another. Pete, the guy who runs this, used to have that, compassionate capitalism in cannabis. And I think we can even more so, because the more psychedelics you do, hopefully the more compassionate you become, right? So the more you give. So I really think, organizations and fundamental like that, to be able to do so, even the churches, that are set up around the countries that are doing it, they don't take a donation for the sacrament, but it's either a church membership or something like that. And we really need to be able to get into all the people that need it, regardless of costs, regardless of anything, because this isn't, these are plants. We're paying way too much for plants and fungi these days right now, and it's absolutely insane. This is our health and wellness. This was given to us by our source. This is, we're a part of it. We are not on this earth to dominate it. We're on this earth to be a part of it, and we have to learn more of that and understand it and are taking this stuff back. So. It's just gradual. It's just do what you can to be able to help those in need and those people next to you after you heal. Exactly that. You want to heal others, and the more people that do this, the more YouTube videos you watch. People who go do ayahuasca, they always come back with that mission. I want to teach someone else. I want to help another addict get off of opiates, and because it gives you that oneness, and cannabis, I think, enters that. It gives you sort of your sort of sense of self a little bit more, and then really, and depending on the psychedelic, some more so than others, and depending on your dose, I prefer more than less. You really can get to know yourself and your goals and what can bring you about to be the best person. So we need to be able to present that and do that for everyone. It's 2canna.org. We're going to have retreats pretty much monthly this year. We did our first few with veterans, because they are, again, the blood and the soil of our earth and our U.S. and what we stand for. And these people fight for these rights and are continuing to get arrested for these substances, and it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's got to stop. And, collectively we have to do this. So it's great that this turnout was more than the last turnout at Cannadelic, and I know as awareness continues to grow, we're going to get more and more people part of this movement that want to heal and free themselves for all the bullshit that we often live with on a daily basis.
Beautiful.
My thoughts were more so with access. I just had a brain fucking fart, but give me 1 second. That happens a lot. It's more so to do with
Take your time.
I'm gonna come back.
Okay. Well,
Thanks,
while we're
guys.
getting on that, we're going to go into questions in a few minutes, and that's fine. 1 second. Before we do that, I'm going to go down the line real quickly and just like 30-second answers. Give them some homework that can empower us. What's one thing that we can do, that each person could do? Let's take some personal accountability and some responsibility so we can move this forward. So we don't go home and have the same discussion next year. We don't want to do that. So what's one piece of advice you can give these people to help kind of push it along? And something manageable that they can do. Don't tell them invest $50 million unless they have it.
Yeah, no. Visit Justice Foundation's website. So it's justice.foundation. www.justus.foundation, so you can become part of our community. And also, I'm going to challenge everybody to visit your congressional leader's district office that is closest to you and your state representative and senator's district office that's closer to you, and just share your stories and your experience with psychedelics. So even if you can't speak to the actual sitting politician, speak to their staff, and do that as often as you can. When you're out of town but in your state, that should be on the agenda for any vacation or business trip, that you're going to visit the district office for the representatives who are in that city that you're visiting. And that'll make a huge impact on the work that we do.
Excellent.
Well, and I was going to say, so don't wait for psychedelics to be legal. Just like with cannabis, it's about the picks and shovels. And yes, Florida is a closed market, but there are a lot of supporting ancillary industries that support the cannabis industry. It's the same thing with psychedelics. It's not just about set and setting, it's about soul. So it's about creating experiences, cognitive thrills, understanding. Start a functional mushroom brand if you have that in you, if you want to do product. Create SOPs. Your investors will be impressed by that, because if you're thinking about how to grow a business and you're anticipating that it will change, that the legal status will change, you'll be ready for that. So I think there's so much we can do. Don't wait. Just jump in. That would be, and absolutely contact your congressman and get out there and vote and sign the petition and know what's happening. Be aware that you are part of the movement. You're not just a witness to it. You're part of it.
We're voting for Mike.
I remembered what I was going to say, first of all. I've been struck by lightning twice, so I have an excuse.
You would.
Right? But I was going to talk about, with access, for me, it's more about inclusion. And so a part of access is also including people in the community. And we talk about the psychedelic community, we talk about the cannabis community, but we also exclude people from it when they're trying to get into it. And I think that is something that needs to be talked about and discussed. And I think there was we talk in memes as the simplest way of communication. I think there was a meme that I saw that somebody shows up and they're not dressed like a wooks. All the wooks are like, oh, you're not dressed the right way, right? And it's there is a community, that we have, but at the same time, it's there's different people are at very different parts of their journey. So I would encourage everybody to be very, very inclusive in your communication, and definitely do reach out to your local representatives and hold them accountable to the things that are going to matter, that are going to come up in the next 24-month election cycle.
I love that point about community. I call it tenure privilege, where it's I've been in 10 years. Well, I've been in 7 years. You have this new person who's super enthusiastic and they don't feel welcome. So thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it.
Mike, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just my last 30 seconds, just number one, be grateful every day for everything. We live in a blessed world. It's amazing. Nature, everything. Just be grateful every day. Remind yourself every day of that, because then you can be your best you, and then you can help other people. Then you can, just live your life and be happier, and that helps everybody. And then, help me get elected. I think we can do this, and we can change the better for everybody. So appreciate it.
Beautiful. And then while we're here, obviously support this event, support Pete and Colleen, support all the vendors, support all the sponsors, sign up, meet people, network, right? Let's keep these things going. So at this point, I'll take some questions. Does anybody have questions? All right. Hold on. Let's give you a microphone.
Why is it so cold in here?
Great question. I've been trying to figure that out all weekend.
Yeah, thanks. What's up, guys? With the anticipation of psychedelic legislation coming out and be able to apply for cultivation and manufacturing licenses, as a fellow New Yorker, I was lucky enough to have a conviction. I was able to apply, but I didn't for one of the first 150 dispensaries in New York. Do you anticipate, should we go get arrested for possession of psychedelics in New York today?
No.
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 Okay.
Because we don't know what the future will hold. So the card license type is what you're referring to, conditional adult use retail dispensary.
Correct.
That's what we do at the Justice Foundation for the cannabis industry, and we will do the same work for the for the psychedelics industry. To be a Justice Fellow, I'm so glad you asked that question. So one, it's defining legacy, right? And pushing for legacy to have its place in legislation. So in defining legacy, and this is from community, you don't have to be arrested to be considered legacy, but we want legacy to be prioritized. Justice involved is a first step towards remedy to the community, but our best desired approach is not for just a justice involved designation. Justice involved really is what makes it easier for regulators, because they're like, it's yes or no, so we can find these people. No, I think we can define legacy for cannabis, define legacy for psychedelics. The definition that I'm trying to socialize to be a global definition through ASTM standards is legacy is a person who has commercialized, sacramentally used, ceremonially used, spiritually used cannabis, or we can interchange psychedelics, outside of the legal framework for a period of at least 5 years prior to legalization. So there's like a look back period, so it's legitimate. And they made, for those who commercialize, at least 50% of their income came from being legacy. Once we can have a definition that's globally accepted or within jurisdiction accepted, then the people who, I don't want to say we're smart enough not to get caught, but they've been in the industry.
You can't even get a license in New York right now.
What's that?
You can't even get a license in New York if you.
It's not that they can't get a license. They couldn't get it in the first 150 licenses that were available. What we did as Justice, like I personally wrote with the applicant 25 licenses, 25 applications for free. So we're going to support for that justice involved. And then now that there's a larger pool where everyone can apply, we're going to scale and do the same work, whether you were arrested or not. So you may not get priority as justice involved when we get there for psychedelics, but if we start evangelizing this legacy definition, it may replace justice involved in as far as priority and extra priority. So that's what we're working on now, is socializing that, hey, not everyone got caught, but they built this thing. So if we continue to do that work in the cannabis industry and have a parallel stream for doing that work in psychedelics, you won't have that pressure of feeling, hey, maybe if I get arrested, then I will have, then I'll have this priority later. That's not our desired environment. We want the people who built this thing, whether they got arrested or not, to get priority and have a really robust legacy integration strategy. You're very welcome.
Great question,
Great answer. You should have hired a better lawyer originally. Stay out of it.
Hi, I have a question for actually Doc and Masha and Mike. So the question is, I understand from Masha from a previous presentation that there are terpenes that are unscheduled. And so, I'm sorry, tryptamines yes. in mushrooms that are unscheduled. And so if they're unscheduled, not scheduled on the Controlled Substances Act, then they're legal is what I'm expecting Mike is going to say. My question is, if I can get those unscheduled tryptamines that are legal, are they medically effective?
This Analog Act is going to cover that they're illegal to consume. You can possess them. That's not illegal.
So the Analog Act would potentially, and because the Church of Cytomoxidil is out there, and that's basically what they're doing in their line with it and their argument, that this is an unknown tryptamine that is separate and apart from and not an analog of those two, even though it is actually made from, DMT and cubenesis together. So it becomes an interesting question, and it'll be determined, and I see it like synthetic cannabinoids, right? And it depends on whether or not it's synthetic or naturally derived. But we had this problem with like bath salts and stuff like that in Florida that they were trying to as like non-smokable, non-consumable cannabis type products. So I think, when they catch up with it, they could work on it. At this point in time, I think, it's that question of whether or not it would be or wouldn't be. And I think many points you have to take that risk and determine it and say, well, it may be a point of them sending you a letter or, something of that nature, as opposed to short of arrest saying, hey, this product isn't legal. What is it? Prove it to us, and them going through an issue like that. So it's a very, the best lawyer question, and anyone who goes to law school, the first thing you answer is, it depends. So
Make money off of it today. Don't keep a lot of it on your shelves tomorrow.
Yeah, it's in efficacy, we'd have to wait for clinical trials to be able to prove it, but we can hypothesize that based on the constituents and what it's coming from, and it should work, and then you'd have to see on yourself. But it'd be a gray area, and for medical providers like myself, I can't just be putting it out there, because we'd be putting our license on the line, essentially, which could, cut into our bread and butter, and then I don't have a house or can't feed my kids. And then we'll take this last question. I think we're ready for the next panel.
So as we understand that we experience this psychedelic renaissance right now, we understand we go in there, and we all talking how we should educate people, promote, psychedelics, what positive effects it will bring to the community. But do you think we should also talk, even on these panels here, about, and do you think if there are any, let's say, drawbacks or I would say even dangers to bring in psychedelics to this federal level so it will be widely available, and how that dangers can affect the legal side, because the legal side will be changed as well when they will be rescheduled. Thank you.
Yeah, let's try to, I know it's a complex question, but let's try to get a quick
Not
answer
as
on that.
much danger as alcohol being legal has caused and will continue to cause. So there is no amount of impact that can be made by psychedelics that will harm as many people as alcohol harms every day.
And I said this earlier on a panel, there's about 7,000 Americans a year that die from aspirin and Tylenol, and hundreds of thousands more that overdose or end up with liver toxicity or GI bleeding and other stuff. So not only the efficacy, but the safety profile of cannabis and psychedelics is better than any pharmaceutical product, over the counter or prescription, as far as I'm concerned, and from all the research I've seen.
I completely agree with both comments. I think it comes to the experiential part. It's about a safe environment, right? So being around trusted people, having a guided experience where possible for the experiential environment. But it's no different than when you have an elderly Alzheimer's patient in the hospital. They pay people who aren't doctors or nurses, but they're called sitters. And they sit with them because we anticipate the danger, right? So I don't think it's very different from what we do in other environments with vulnerable people. So I think we incorporate that. And then on the product side, we rarely look at things from a perspective of, let's compare side effect to side effects. With cannabis or with psychedelics, when we're talking dangers, when we see these pharmaceutical commercials, there's 30 seconds of, cautionary information. But when you're looking at cannabis, it's may make you drowsy, may make you want to eat. I'm being very simplistic about it, but we have to start looking at things from comparing side effect to side effect when we're talking in terms of danger and harm.
Beautiful. I think that's our time, folks. Otherwise, I'm going to get the boot over here from Dennis and start throwing stuff at us. And
I wish I had one of those long canes,
Yeah, exactly. The music's got to come on. If y'all have any questions, we'll be available over here on the side. Should we take a picture together? Yes, please.
Yeah,
Let's
grab
do
a photo. All right, give it up one time for them.
Yeah.
Come on. Let them know that you appreciated that work.
Dennis, get in the photo, man. Get in here with us.
like
Get
how
in
you're
here. Get in here. Get in here.
Come on, man.
The host with the most, Micropreneur Podcast.
I like how everyone holds their breath for the photo. You ever notice that? They're freeze. Hold your I can keep cracking jokes while she's making me
Thank
look
you,
good up
everybody.
there. Yes. Thank you, everybody, for being on the panel. We've got one more panel today to close out Cannadelic 2023, right? And I'm sure a lot of you in here are involved with the cannabis business, and if you're not, maybe after you leave today, you will be. So this next one is about grassroots pioneers paving the way for cannabis reform. Extremely important. We cannot forget the giants whose shoulders we stand on today. And I believe this is going to be involving Mike DeLisi, that is a name that I recognize, and a number of others here. So this is your call to action, panelists. If you're on the next panel, this is a great time to make your way towards the stage. This has been a trip introducing everyone, not just because of the microdoses that I've taken from the various vendors. Thank you. That's my cue. You're all good. Are you guys ready to rock and roll?
I always love hearing
You're
your jokes.
really
though.
good at what you do. I have to just say, I haven't got to meet you yet. Cheers.
Hey, I'm a fan.
How's it going? Thank you. Absolutely, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, perfect.
graced
Okay.
with your presence.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I think we could have a lot of fun up here.
I like names that rhyme that I can remember that also involve cannabis. So thank you very much. Again, my name's Dennis Walker. This has been a pleasure. You'll probably see me once more to close down the afternoon, and this is the final panel of the event. So all due respect, I'll hand the mics over.
Thank you. You guys, please give him one more round of applause, you guys. He's been cracking me up all day.
Jump up there.
Keeping the vibrations high. And as we're waiting for everyone to get on here, hello.
Hello.
All right, let's get comfortable. I hope everyone is really excited for this last panel tonight. We're going to close it out right. I believe there's only three or four of us. We got one more. We got one more that's supposed to be here. Rick? Oh, awesome. There we go. I'm going to actually let you get in the middle here. So you guys, this is a really exciting panel. I'm kind of fanning out right now, and I'll let them introduce themselves, but once you understand who these people are on this panel, I think you're going to have a real appreciation for what we're talking about. So we're talking about legacy pioneers, grassroots, baby. Hello, the man himself. Welcome, welcome. Hi, honey. So Rick and Randy and Krista are up here with us, and we're going to be talking about legacy pioneers and cannabis reform. So before we get into it, I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves because I don't think I have that honor just yet. So with further ado, let's start down here. Krista, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Krista Jones with the THC Girls and the Highly Connected app. I've been in the cannabis space for going on 15 years or so in the commercial space, and I have a huge cultivation background, a huge marketing background, and I've been able to be blessed to be able to work across the nation in both THC and CBD and experience a lot of things. So I'm very, very excited to be able to sit up next to these guys. So appreciate you having me.
We're glad you're here. Richard, you want to go ahead? No, go ahead. Okay. Thank you, everybody. My name is Randy Lanier, and I'm just feeling blessed to be here. I've been in the cannabis space for about a little over 5 decades. So it's been a minute, but part of that journey was locked up, along with my brother here. I spent 27 years in maximum security prisons throughout the United States for importing and distributing weed back in the 80s. Along with that, I was a race car driver, quite successful, driving the most exotic, fastest sports cars on the planet. And that took me to Indianapolis 500, where in 1986 I was a Rookie of the Year. But the following year, 1987, I found myself in a courtroom facing a life sentence for importing and distributing over 1,000 pounds of weed. And they had no weed. I took my case to trial and ended up getting convicted, and the rest is, I'm sitting here feeling like a blessed man. I'm just so grateful to be here. And it's been a long journey, but it's been such a good journey because a lot of times we have to go through struggles to really understand what it is that we're here for, purposes. Our purpose is to be of service and uplift others. So I'm just blessed to be here, and the industry, for me, is really looking good. I'm really excited, and we'll get into that, what's going on, and how we see the future of cannabis coming up down the track. I'm really a positive, optimistic person on that issue. And with that, I want to say thank you all for sharing your time with us. That's really amazing to me because inspiration and magnificence is all around us, and it's all within us. If you just look around and look at your neighbor beside you, you'll see inspiration and magnificence sitting right there beside you. And we're in good times with this. So blessed. I'll turn the mic over to my brother right here, so who's doing excellent things.
How you doing? Can you guys hear me? My name is Richard DeLisi. I've spent 32 years in prison for a nonviolent marijuana charge. I'm the longest serving in the country, probably, up until now. Back in the day, I smuggled over 1 million pounds of marijuana into this country. I've been doing this since I was 13, and I'm not going to stop anytime soon. I think they thought maybe because they let me out of prison, I was going to stop doing what I was doing, but what's going on right in here today, right in this building, is what I'm all about. You know, this is my thing, and it's going to be my thing till I go to my grave, most likely. And I have my own brand now. I have Delicioso Flamingo Kush with True Leaf in Florida and Maryland now, and I'm expanding to California and Washington, D.C., and Maryland, Portland, Oregon, Denver, Colorado. I mean, there's like about, I guess, 6 or 7 people that are trying to get my products in their stores right now. And my son Rick Jr. and Kenneth Darby, which is my nephew, he's like my son also. I got to give a shout out to them, man. They're making all this happen. You know, I'm one part of the deal, and they take care of the other parts of the deal that we need to get done, just to make sure that everybody's on the right page. You know, and we got to give a big shout out to like the Last Prisoners Project, Freedom Grow. I mean, these are people that are working real hard to get people, men and women like me. I'm fortunate. I'm sitting here talking to you, everybody, but you know, there's over 40,000 men and women that are in prison, most of color, that are sitting there just waiting to come home, waiting for something to change, waiting for the system to change, waiting for us to elect people that will do the right thing in the industry, because they're definitely not there yet. I mean, the president went through that whole deal with all these inmates he was going to let out, 8,000. Not one of them got out yet. And none of them are going to get out on his deal, because nobody read the fine print underneath. So when you guys are electing people, that's what we have to think of, because the president's in the White House because of people that smoke pot, because of what he said, because the race was so close that we made the difference. When he said he was going to legalize this and decriminalize and give everybody that had felony charges, was going to let them go, that's why we voted for him, right? Isn't that why we voted? But he didn't do anything. Politics.
Let's get into that, actually. I feel like that's a huge challenge, right? And you know, we obviously have a lot we're facing with cannabis reform. You two are the OGs in this. You know, if it wasn't for what you've been through, Chris and I wouldn't have been able to do what we've done the last 15 years, right? The biggest issues we had was cashing our checks at the bank, you know, compared to what you've been through. But with that being said, the fact that we're here now and able to have this discussion, what is some actions that we all could take in this audience to help with the challenges that we face? And what do you think some of the biggest challenges are in cannabis reform right now? Obviously, you know, people of color. You know, where else do we need to target?
Absolutely. What we have to do is we have to decriminalize it. We have to make sure whoever we put in office, we're putting them in there. So we have to think about it before we do it. Everybody that's in for marijuana or hash or, you know, and they're nonviolent need to come home, and they need to come home now. They don't need to come home later on. We need them home now, because they're affecting the 40,000 that are in right now in the states, in the United States, not in the feds, I'm talking about just state prisons, is over 44,000 men and women that are in prison. And if you walk through that door right there, there's people making millions and millions of dollars on what I was in prison for 32 calendars. So we definitely got to do something about it. It's got to be done, and it's got to be done. It should have been done 30, 40 years ago. What's happening right now in this building should have been 40 years ago. And this is what we got to work on. This is like an important thing. This is my, you know, I mean, I have my own brand and everything, and it pays my rent. But my goal is to get everybody home that's in there for this.
Yes, indeed. So there's many avenues that you can go because there's many advocacy groups out there that are helping. We just got news yesterday, Luke Scamazzo, who was one of the first dispensary owners on the West Coast to get indicted by the federal government. He just got released yesterday after 15 years in penitentiary. So I'm vice president of a nonprofit organization that's all volunteers. We support cannabis prisoners and their families. We have 188 cannabis prisoners with 166 children. And we support them directly. We build relationships with the families. We help them through emergencies throughout the years. We help them with a WISH program. If there's any one of these 188 children, 188 prisoners, or their children or their family members need something, they can contact any one of the board members for freedomgrow.org, and we make it happen. We put it at their doorstep. So we do that throughout the year, 7 days a week. We're granting wishes, and it's a beautiful thing. I'm just blessed to be here and to share that with you. You can go to freedomgrow.org. You can sign a letter asking President Biden to release these men so they can come home and be with their families. I was released 8 years ago, and just finally, it's amazing because the future does look so bright. The state of New Jersey has a social equity program that granted me a social equity cultivation license. So now it's an amazing thing because it took me 3 decades to get out of prison, but now I find myself, along with Richard, coming out with some brandings and some products eventually for myself throughout the United States. You'll see my brand will be called Octane because of the racing and the history that I have with racing cars, and I like gassy weed as it is, so I try to smoke gassy weed every day. So there's a lot you can do, as Richard was saying. Look at who you're voting for. And back to the question about President Biden making that statement, releasing 6,000 prisoners. There is not a single person in the federal prison system for possession of marijuana. Does not happen. It does not exist. Not a single one. State prisoners, yes. We have 2 people in the state of Mississippi that's doing 30 years for an ounce of weed. I mean, that's insanity. It's crazy. And there's other people we have in Mississippi State Prison that's for over a kilo of weed that's also one's doing 60 years for over a kilo of weed. So contact freedomgrow.org, step towards, and we're always looking for volunteers to do events. And 420, I'm in Washington, D.C., doing a vigil in front of the White House with a lot of college students, and we'll be there letting them know that, hey, there's supporters out here, and there's things got to change.
And another thing, anybody that you know in this industry that is profiting from it should donate to the Last Prisoners Project for inmates and Freedom Grow. These are two organizations that try to help people, to try to help families, to try to help our kids. When I was in, my kids grew up without me, all right? My grandchildren grew up without me. You know, when I came home, one of my grandchildren was like 17 or 18, you know, it's like, and that's what's happening right now. So, you know, all these families, I mean, it connects the 40,000 that are in the state, it affects 1 million people. 1 million people, like cousins, brothers, sisters, you know, everybody, friends, everybody's involved in the deal. So if you know people that are making money from weed, you should tell them, hey, donate to these organizations. These are organizations that are righteous, that are doing something for people that are in trouble, like I was. But we didn't have it like that when I was in trouble. But now that I can speak up and do something about it, I want to do as much as I can. And I want to do it fast. I don't want this to drag out and the last guy gets out 10 years from now or something. Let's get this over with. This has got to stop. It's crazy.
I think you bring up a good point. You know, one thing I'm known for is calling out those with power, right? And being outspoken. And so I think the two of you really bring up really important points. You know, like in December, Biden was urged to deschedule, obviously, marijuana, and that didn't happen. And that was just December that just happened. So obviously things are happening, right? But we have to call out the realness real quick, and then I'll get back to the questions. But it is a trend now to be a part of cannabis. And so we lose sight of the priorities that need to happen. And this is on the top list of priorities right here. Like you said, those numbers that you just told everyone about who's in jail and those children that are suffering, no one should ever have to go through that again. When we do have human beings out there profiting, we have, you know, ourselves who are getting featured and able to fluidly maneuver through this life while selling cannabis or being involved in it. It's not okay. So why do you all think us grassroots and legacy pioneers should be the ones paving the way for cannabis reform? Or should we open it up to the people a little bit more?
The way I see it, it's for everybody to open up and come aboard. That's why I'm so happy to see a lot of these states awarding social equity licenses, but they're not doing enough in the states that are doing the social equity programs, such as real estate, locations, grant money to help. It's okay to give someone a license to get you back in. Oh, you served time in prison, here's a license. What are you going to do when you need millions of dollars to build out? What are you going to do when you need just to go find your genetics if you don't have the connections and the wherewithal for financing and so forth? You're dead in the water. And I've been working on my license since last March the 28th, and I'm making progress. But in this industry, there's some charlatans and a lot of sharks. And you have to really pay attention to who you're working with in this industry. But on a good note, I see states such as Missouri just yesterday is opening doors for recreational use, and they're converting all the medical into recreational. They're giving it. So we're seeing some light that's happening because of education. Back in the day, there's been decades and decades of stigma placed on this plant. Unwarranted and unjustified stigma. And that needs to change, and that's sparking conversations about how this plant is a plant that heals. It is a plant that attracts people of like-mindedness. Believe that. This plant will find you, it will connect you with peoples. That's amazing things will grow out of it. So we're all blessed to be in the space, to be sharing right now moments with each other. And for me, the space is looking good, but there's lots of work to do to help get our brothers and sisters incarcerated. That's out now. That should be out.
I think that's one of the biggest things that as somebody like Sanjay and myself, that we really, it's our responsibility and our duty to understand who we're working for and who we're supporting and who we're putting our heart and soul into, because we have a lot of drive. You know, a lot of people that are in this space have been exhausted, right? And we can do a lot. And we've been able to do a lot. And right now, our mission is to work with the right people, like you see here. And that's something that we really, really strive for.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that little topic, the right people, because one thing about this industry is relationships. Building good relationships, working relationships and stuff, and finding the right people to work with and creating teams that are really really good teams to work with and work for. We heard some growers up here early talking about the teamwork and stuff. And that's what it's about, is building relationships and really leading with integrity with whatever the products or extractions or whatever it is that you're involved with. So building great teams, having relationships with people that have integrity means a lot in this industry.
I believe our consumers need to also have that integrity as well when they're buying. You know, support the brands that are supporting, you know, people like you. We need those organizations to move forward any type of movement whatsoever, any positive movement forward. So, you know, what do you think we can do to become more inclusive in the reform community? You know, how can we add that into the community more? Because a lot of people are more focused on what's the price, you know, what's the terpenes, what's the percentage, who's this brand, rather than thinking, well, who can I help that's locked up for something that I'm freely doing over here?
You see, when I sign up with somebody, if I do something with somebody, I always make sure that whatever the contract is, that a certain donation from their net profit after the year now is going to, like, I have 2 organizations that I donate to. This is one of them right here. And the other one is the people that got me out, the Last Prisoners Project and Freedom Grow. They're the 2 organizations that True Leaf saves a certain amount to donate at the end of the year from the products that I sell in their store, on the retail value of it, not on you know, not on my, it's not on my end, but that was the contract I made with them, to make sure that these organizations get a certain amount of dollars every year.
I'm calling them up Monday.
Get on it.
I'm on it. I'm on the phone Monday, all right?
Well, that's, you know, it's funny because when you say this, I always make a joke that we should hotbox the White House, you know, and it's, instead of the purge, it's a night, once a year, we all have to like lock our kids up and hotbox our houses. Everybody, you know, POTUS, everyone gets high. But now you bring something up. You know, why don't all the dispensaries, business owners, if you're a big corporation, if you are a stockholder, if you are publicly traded, the rule should be that you have to donate X amount.
I'm sure everybody that I just said that to realized exactly what you're saying right now.
It's an epiphany.
You know, it's.
Why aren't we doing this? And you know, it's because we don't know that we have that power. Your voice means a lot more. I was just, all of us were just normal people. You know, they were obviously ahead of their time, but I accidentally started working in dispensaries from bud tender to boardroom. I had no clue that I was going to use it to heal myself and then cure other people. And yeah, sue me, whatever. We did cure people. We saved lives. And so now, instead of just saving lives with the health benefit, because that's also forgotten about, we need to save lives out of jail, and out of prison. And so if you have any advice to regular advocates that would like to get into cannabis reform, is there a career in that, or is it all just kind of nonprofit volunteerism, or is there some type of career that you can create out of that so that you can make a living and continue doing what you're doing with your passion? Is there a possibility?
Absolutely, because, and you're talking about a career, so the first thing you think about is success. You want to get in something that is success. And I like to say, my view of success is a little bit different. If your actions mirror your intentions, you're a successful person every friggin' day of your life. So there's expungement clinics that you can go to, webinars. I'll be in Washington, D.C. on the 19th, 20th, and the 21st of April. 4/20, I'm in Pocono, Pennsylvania, doing a 2-day event. So there's ways to get involved, to get careers going, from all the dispensaries and the operations going here, from HR that operates in all these companies. Just find your niche that you like to be in, and it's not so much work. Because, as you know, if you're doing something that you really passionate about, it's not work. You're doing stuff that you love, and you create really beautiful things from it, and you help people in so many ways. So for success, for any career, let your actions mirror your intentions.
And to keep positive, you know, because I love all the positive vibrations over here. So let's switch it up a little bit. You know, what positive progress are you currently seeing as of this new 2 months of the year? And where do we see it going in the future for reform? Obviously, we have baby steps happening, and with the work you two are doing, where do you see it going in the next 2 years with all this progress?
I'm hoping that it could probably, if we could get in the right ears, if the right ears would listen to what we're talking about, it could be done in 2 years. There could be 40,000 less people in jail. There could be 8,000 less people in the feds. You know, that we wouldn't have to pay for out of our tax dollar to keep them in prison for something that they make trillions of dollars on every year. This is a big deal we're talking about. It's not like a lightweight deal. When I wake up in the morning, I dream about doing what I'm doing right now, letting people know about what's really going on. And I do it every day. I'll go store to store just to talk to customers. Like True Leaf stores, I go to probably 3 a day in Florida. And when I go there, I talk to the customers. I don't just go there to say, hey, what's up? I go there to talk to customers to change what's going on with the government and the states, their laws. You know, I got 4 felonies on my record. That's a big thing. For what? For this. For what we're doing right now. For what's going on outside them doors right now.
One thing I do see that is really promising is the governor of California just asked to do some research about multi-state importations to other states, Oregon and Washington State. So with that said, it's coming once they figured out legalization federally, but these states should be able to have shipments from one state, sales to one state to the other. And I think we're making progress because of education. Education is one of the keys to expanding any industry, especially one that has so many compliance and rules and regulations. And when I got this license a year ago, it's like every day something new I was told I had to go through and jump through a hoop. And we're still managing, and with my license, it's coming about. But being vigilant with this in this industry is a wonderful thing, because you're going to really reap not just profitability, but relationships with really wonderful people that are really here to help and heal people. It's not all about funding and money and so forth, because this plant does amazing things.
I think that to add to what you're saying is I really see cannabis, you know, once interstate commerce takes place, being a lot like wine, right? We desire Oregon wine or California wine, and I think cannabis would be the same or similar.
Well, with all that being said, I do see a lot of positivity happening. So what do you think that the current advocates and the current activists can do, you know, furthermore to push it? You know, what else? I mean, I feel like we're doing everything we possibly can, right? But what other advice could you give to the people that are already on the ground trying to do what they can, right? And me, personally, you know, Chris and I, we work all damn day. What else could I do to help, right?
I can tell you where Freedom Grow is going, because I sat on the board and we talk about how can we bring this to other people. We're working on a golf event right now in the state of Florida, a charity golf event to bring attention to the situation with the cannabis prisoners and their families. We're working on comedy relief for cannabis prisoners. We're going to have an event in Boca Raton, comedy relief for cannabis prisoners at the Black Box. So we're working on other events that's not normally in the mainstream for cannabis. So Freedom Grow is on point, trying to work out and bring out this situation to the public through comedy, through comedians. So there's a lot going on that we can do. And when these events come to your neighborhood or your city, go check it out. Be a part of it, man, because all the money that goes to our event goes to the prisoners and their families. So that's some of the areas that Freedom Grow is working on.
Just be active in what you love. If you love this, then be active in it. Don't sit and just say, okay, oh, well, my pockets are getting heavy, you know. I got too high last night. I couldn't think straight about. Just keep doing what you want to happen. That's the important part of the deal. If you can keep doing what you want to happen, it's going to happen. If your mind can think about it, it's going to happen. And I can't say more. I can't say more than that, because it's up to the people to get this changed. And we need everybody that's listening right now to listen and make a change. Think about tomorrow. Think about the people that aren't here because of this. And, you know, sometimes in the morning when I wake up, I cry when I think about what's going on in this country with people. And I mean, I'm soft when it comes to that. I could tell you, you know, I got goosebumps right now just thinking about it. I'm soft when it comes to people's hearts and their family, because I'm a family type of man. I mean, like, I can't thank my nephew, Kenneth, and my son, and my other nephews for stepping up to the plate and wanting to see their uncle. You know, their uncle that's not, you know, they're much younger than me, but they still want to see me succeed in what my passion is. And they're backing me 100%. And I can't ask for more than that. That's why I'm working so hard at this, to make a change. And with that, that's what I have to say.
And what it is everything changes throughout our life. Constantly change is happening. But for real, there's one thing that doesn't change, and that's the energy that created us. It is here and it doesn't change. It's the only thing that's eternal. But when you're creating change, you ask yourself, how do you identify yourself? And if you identify yourself as a person that wants to do great things and be of uplifting service to others, well, then that's what you can generate. Because our behavior, we validate our behavior through our identity. So we identify ourselves as people that love the plant. But this plant can give to others in so many beneficial ways. And that's what we're about, is trying to, up here with Delicioso, Freedom Grow, and Last Prison Project, we want to help these families, and we're doing it, one prisoner at a time, and the great things are on the horizon.
We're doing it right now. We're doing it right now, right this second.
I'm really honored to be up here with you both because, you know, one thing that I personally wanted to ask you is, do you ever get tired of this fight? You know, you're still out here fighting. You're still having to be outspoken. You still have to educate people. And of course, I understand you have a passion. You want to help your brothers and sisters. But, you know, don't you ever feel like the gas is running out just a little with this fight? Or do you feel more fueled now more than ever?
No, I feel like I'm making progress every day. You know, I can see the progress. I can see it with my own eyes when I talk to people. You know, I see the way they're moving, the way they're changing, the way they think. You know, it's put on the planet for us. That's why it's here. We're just finding out about it now. What kind of great things it can do for you. You know, who knew that you could rub some cannabis oil on your arm and your arm would feel better? I mean, that was unheard of 20 years, 15 years ago. That was unheard of. And now it's like you can get it anywhere you want. It's everywhere. So
I feel like we're making progress because I see the prisoners that are coming out. Just in the last 3 months, we've had quite a few prisoners released. Just had a prisoner that come out of New Mexico, 12 pounds of weed, 12 pounds, 31 years of prison time he did, 31 years for 12 pounds of weed. We have a couple here in Florida, a husband and wife. For 50 pounds of weed, she was pregnant when they got pulled over, and they ended up getting 5 and 6 years, and she had the baby at the county jail. They took the baby, so they had to go through the courts to get the mother to let the uncle raise the baby. But this is the stigma that this has been going on with this plant. So through education and the benefits we get from educating and speaking about it, going to events, we broaden the mind to say, wait a minute, this is completely fucking wrong. No one should be locked up like this for little bits of weed or even large bits of weed. It's a flower, it's a plant. So big headways are coming, education's happening, and these MSOs, I got to take my hat off to some of them because some of them are really stepping up to the plate. For Christmas, we went to an MSO, and they volunteered to support us and give us all the funding for commissary funds for 188 people and 166 children. That's amazing, because now these people, when you're in prison and you receive a check, it's like, damn, man, someone's loving me. I've gotten support out there. I'm going to get through this shit. I'm gonna really make it through this stuff because I've got people in my corner. And that's amazing things. So everything we do at Freedom Grow, we send it all to the prisoners and their families. None of us take a salary. We're all volunteers, and we make it happen. So check out freedomgrow.org. I ask you, please. We're here to support all of these people that are currently locked up and their families.
My final question of tonight, and then we're going to wrap it up with some questions, is, and I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, open borders and also felonies. If you have a felony, you cannot work within the industry, which is hyperbole. It's unbelievable. Do you see, when it happens, I'm going to manifest it, when it federally becomes legal and they do get everyone out of prison, when it happens, do you also see the next step being that they will lift that ban of having a felony and not being able to legally work within the industry?
I think if the country legalizes it, they're going to have to take all the felonies out. It's got to be part of the deal. It's got to be in the paperwork that people that go to prison for nonviolent marijuana charges or hash charges, that they come out, their record's sponged, and they got to give them something besides $100. Because they're collecting, this state right here is collecting millions and millions and millions of dollars every month on the sales of marijuana in this state. And this is only one of them. That's what we got to hope for, that their eyes open up and realize what's going on.
Expungement is a big thing for the people that can come out. They can get housing, federal housing. They can get loans. Just a lot to do with any kind of federal help. So the expungement's got to help. You can look into expungement clinics. There's plenty of them around the nation. 40 Tons, they do work-related expungement stuff. That's another advocacy group that does great things for expungement and helping people get jobs and stuff within this industry. So if you're really interested, or you're in this industry and you want to get in this industry, it's really many avenues to do it. And it's just like anything else. If you live, eat, sleep, drink, talk, and love what you're doing, you're going to be good at it.
And I just like to give a shout out to Steve D'Angelo and Mary Bailey with Last Prisoners Project. It's because of them two people that I'm sitting here up on the stage talking to you guys right now, or I'd still be doing another 30 in Florida.
That deserves a round of applause, you guys. That's a big deal. Thank you.
I would just add, if that doesn't happen, I see that the black market's continuing, right? If you keep the people out, then it will continue to happen. So.
With the black market, if I say, the rules and the regulations and 280E tax is killing the industry, and that's why the black market will always exist until they change up and educate about how inclusive this industry needs to be with open borders.
There's always going to be the black market. Always. When it's completely legalized, there's still going to be black market.
I have to agree with that, because when you have so many rules and compliances and regulations and taxes, well, the other avenue is out the back door. And that's happening. And
Especially the way they want to tax everything. That's why black market will stay.
It will thrive.
But education with testing and the results of these certifications and so forth, you can really educate people, because you want to smoke safe weed. And with the markets going on these days, you don't know exactly what's in the weed. But if you know you're getting it from someone, a store that's with integrity, and you can't get away from it, you know what you're consuming.
It all truly does start with education, and I think with everything here, it starts with education. So I urge all of you, get on your social media, email it to your friends, educate your parents, your uncles. Doesn't really matter. I mean, that's where it starts. As I said in my earlier panel, I'm a conspiracy factualist, and now it's all trending. You know why? Because we chirped, and that's what happens. And so all we have to do is keep spreading the word, and then we'll be able to educate everyone in the world so that they don't want to buy black market, because they want to find good wellness, and they see it as wellness first. You know, and so it really has to be a paradigm shift if there's anything that we learn here today. So I thank all of you for being on this panel, but before we finish, I would love to open it up to the audience for some questions. Awesome, I knew we'd have some.
What do you think is the biggest challenge, Randy DeLisi, going forward? Do you think it's the private prison system or the politicians that are holding up the change?
Well, first of all,
I don't want to stir. If there's any politicians in the crowd, I'm sorry, but fuck you guys.
You know, the private prisons, I'm not a fan of them at all. They shouldn't exist, and there's some stupid shit going on within the private prisons.
Special interest.
Special interests. Just what they end up, because it's a dollar thing. So if you can feed an inmate for $2, I went into prison in 1987, and they was feeding an inmate $2.80 a meal a day. I come out 27 years later, and it's under $2 a day. So with private prisons, they'll get it down to 85 cents a day. So that's, I'm not at all for prisons
not exactly
run by
gourmet
that.
either.
And politicians, my viewpoint on that is really kind of sour, because a lot of times they say things that constituents wants to hear. So you got to really educate yourself on who you're voting for and the issues that you're really looking at to go. You was talking about change. As far
What do you think is the biggest hurdle going forward in making the change, as we were talking, or you guys were
Politicians.
talking about politicians, right? So
Absolutely.
How do we make that change? How do we influence them to make that change?
So I'm dealing with something right now in New Jersey, because my license has been in the CRC, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, for 3 months. I'm having a hard time drawing in investors because I don't have an annual license. I have a conditional license. So some of us that I'm involved with have stepped to a senator to get them involved to move things forward. So then taking part of a township meeting in New Jersey and being a part of the city councilman, next thing I know, I'm involved with the city councilman, and I like them. going to the communities and getting community support for our license in New Jersey. It took us a few months to really dial that in because I'm not from New Jersey. I'm from Fort Lauderdale. I grew up in Hollywood, Florida. And I went to prison all throughout the United States, from Leavenworth to Lewisburg to Florence, Colorado to Terre Haute, Indiana. They'll bust your ass real quick if they think you're up to something that's nefarious. And I was trying to get my ass out, one way or the other. But I'm here now, and I have a license, and I'm coming here to Florida maybe. We're working on a brand called Octane. So, got good things coming on, and for change, the politicians, Manny, look at who you're voting for.
Careful listening to mainstream as well. Do your own research and you think for yourself.
Hey, first of all, thank you all for your service to this industry.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, secondly, do you all by chance know Jimmy Bickett, Joe Keith Bickett, and Johnny Boone out of Kentucky?
Johnny Boone, I know. I was a cellmate of Bobby Joe Shoemaker.
Oh, yeah.
He is my brother from another mother.
We saw him not long ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we're from Kentucky.
Oh.
I basically feel like I owe my career to the Cornbread Mafia.
Yeah, it is.
That's another story that I won't go into right now, but they're friends of ours, and they too sacrificed, as much as you all did. Another thing I'd like to say is, speaking about what can we all do, I've been in advocacy and I've been in the cannabis industry since the 80s. One thing I think we all need to do is work within our own space and speak up and be transparent. And there is a lot of stigma in that, or there can be, but I feel like we need to work within our niche. Another thing I think that we need to do, nationally in advocacy is be able to work with one another. A big problem we have in Kentucky is the advocacy groups work against one another. That slows everything down, and it's totally like from the Senate and the conservative politicians, it's like a divide and conquer situation. And we aren't making any progress because of that. I think it's really important that we can let shit go. And even if there's bills out there that aren't really checking every box, we're willing to keep pushing the movement along and not be infighting within advocacy. Finally, if you do have a platform like we both are blessed with, I think we have to be able to just put ourselves out there a little bit and, give ourselves the opportunity to, there's risk in getting yourself out there, depending on your family situation and what you have, that could be harmed. You have to be cautious, but you also have to be willing to go out there on the edge, because that's the only way we can change anything.
Thank you. And I'm just amazed that you're sitting here, and Bobby Joe was my cellmate. And I have something for you. Well, I have something for you. This is a book I just published August the 2nd. So when I come down, I want you to take this book, and I'll call Bobby Joe when I leave here and speak to him. And we're in amazing times now. This plant is coming legal. It's coming. It's in 38 states now, and it's just furthering the educational tools that we all have, and working with other advocacy groups. We work together. Today, I brought a bunch of a lot of my son. I want to shout out to my son right here. He has the papers. When I got indicted, he was just born. So anyway, I come out, he's 27 years old. And just amazing that I'm here talking to you guys, and things are moving forward with this, and acceptance, but being able to work with others in the advocacy group. Freedom Grow works with every group. We don't care. We want to support these groups. If there's bickering going on with other groups or bills that's not getting passed because of what someone's opinion is, and take this to the bank. If you get yourself bent out of shape over someone's opinion, check your own self, because opinions are the lowest form of knowledge on the planet. It takes no fact. So that's how it is. Just don't get caught up on someone's opinion when things ain't going right. And I'm all about working with anybody.
Unbelievably magical moments right now. I'm over here tearing up, so I'm going to hand the microphone to another man who wants to ask a question.
Mine is a little bit different, a question. It's just an observation I've made over the last couple of months. So, Randy, when we were in Vegas, right, I was hearing one of our growers, or somebody from the growing community, talking about how passionate they are about cannabis and how passionate we are. And, you know, and I was listening and I was like, man, we sound weak to predatory investors. You know, and being like, we have a passion, and it's more than the buck, you know? So I think that makes us look weak. And something that was said here that I also feel needs a little change, right, is that when we say black market, right, are we actually not belittling ourselves, like putting ourselves down? Aren't we a legacy or a traditional market? Like, and I think that we need to understand that, because we've been programmed to think that we're less than, and we're not. We're equal to. We heal. We nurture. So I think we need to be respected for that. And that's just something.
No, I like
yeah.
that. Words can mean a lot. And as we've come through this last decade, or longer than decade, I don't like to use the term marijuana anymore. Just because of the, back in the day, the feelings that hurt of other people. And you're right, as far as the wording can go, black market, traditional, legacy, it goes a long way. This panel, legacy panel. So thank you for bringing that up to us, Joe. I appreciate you. I love you, brother, and you're right on point.
One thing I like to say on my show, and if there's any more questions, I can walk over to you because I think we have one more minute. One thing I always say on my show, you guys, everyone always say love is the answer, okay? We've heard this now for about a century. I don't think that's true. I think it's perspective. And you just helped me have an epiphany, because the 15 years I've been in the industry, I've never heard anyone say that. And I personally have always looked at black market in a negative way, because it's made my fucking life difficult, right? But also, I've now worked with legacy and black market people now that I do consulting, because we're allowed to do that. So I have an appreciation, and I appreciate that. So one thing I took from that, and I think we all can take from that, is yes, love is great, but perspective first, then you can love it, right? So change your perspective a little bit. And I don't know what the solution is to that, but I feel like this is the start right here. These human beings that are up here that have been through hell and back and have been able to help us get to where we are today just by the hell that you went through, should not only be given a tangible award. You know, you should not only get money back, you should not only, you know, there's nothing we can give you back for that except us do our job. And I rattled some bones yesterday during a few panels by saying, hey, do you think it's your duty? Well, guess what? If you're in the industry, you have a job, you have a duty, because you are one step closer to helping someone who doesn't have that ability to do so. They're in a fucking cell. We're not. So I just wanted to say that very passionately, that it's perspective, and I really appreciate that as well. Are there any more questions before we wrap up? It's been a wonderful Cannadelic. It's been a wonderful night. Great, I'm tired. Great, you guys, the mushrooms are kicking in.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, you guys. Really, one more big round of applause, standing ovation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, and as I always like to say on my show, stay high, America. Oh, yes, yes, yes.